There is a mind you have never met. There is a mind you have never met, and it lives inside you, running beneath your awareness like a river beneath a road, carrying everything you have forgotten, everything you have denied, everything you have not yet become, and producing, from its depths, the feelings, the impulses, the dreams, and the decisions that you believe are yours, but that originate in a place you have never visited. Jung called this the unconscious, and he did not mean it as a metaphor. He meant it as a literal, operational, active mind that exists below the threshold of your awareness and that influences everything you think, feel, choose, and become, without your knowledge and usually without your permission. The unconscious is not a warehouse. It is not a filing cabinet where old memories are stored. It is a living intelligence, as active and as purposeful as your conscious mind, but vastly larger, vastly older, and vastly more powerful. And the relationship between the two, the conscious and the unconscious, is the central drama of every human life, whether the person living it knows the drama is playing or not. Think of the decisions you have made that surprised you, the feelings that arrived without explanation, the dreams that disturbed you for reasons you could not name, and consider that each one was a message from a mind you have never met, sent through the only channels available to a consciousness that cannot speak your language. You do not need to meet any mind tonight. Let the unknown rest, vast and present, and know that the mind beneath your mind has been operating since the day you were born, shaping everything, asking nothing, and waiting with infinite patience for the moment you would finally turn inward and notice it was there. It is older and larger than you. It is older and larger than you. And this is the first secret that separates Jung's understanding of the unconscious from everyone else's. Freud saw the unconscious as personal, a reservoir of your own repressed experiences. Jung saw it as both personal and collective, containing not only your individual memories, but the accumulated psychological inheritance of the entire human species, the patterns, the images, the instincts that have been developing for hundreds of thousands of years and that live in you now, not as memories, but as tendencies, as potentials, as the shapes your psyche naturally takes when it is not being managed by your conscious mind. The collective unconscious is older than any civilization, older than any language, older than any individual who has ever lived, and it lives in you with the same authority it lived in every human being before you, producing the same archetypal images, the same fundamental fears, the same deep patterns of meaning that have shaped every culture, every religion, every mythology that humans have ever produced. Think of a dream image that felt ancient, that felt larger than your personal life, that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than your own biography, and consider that the image may have come from the collective layer, the stratum of the unconscious that does not belong to you, but to the species, and that speaks through you in images that are older than your language and more powerful than your personal history. You do not need to access any depth tonight. Let the ancient rest, and know that you carry inside you a mind that has been accumulating wisdom for longer than recorded history. And the wisdom, though you may not know how to read it, is there. Your conscious mind is the smallest part. Your conscious mind is the smallest part of your total psyche, and Jung compared it to a small, bright island in a vast, dark ocean. The island being everything you are aware of and the ocean being everything you are not, and the ocean, by any measure, is incomparably larger than the island. The conscious mind, the part you call I, the part that thinks it is running the show, is a thin surface layer floating on a depth it cannot see, cannot control, and frequently does not even acknowledge. The disproportion is staggering. Your conscious awareness processes a tiny fraction of the information available to the psyche, and the rest, the vast majority, is processed below, in the unconscious, where decisions are made, patterns are recognized, and responses are generated before the conscious mind has any idea they are coming. The conscious mind believes it is in charge because it receives the finished products, the decisions, the feelings, the impulses, and stamps them with the feeling of "I decided this," when in truth the deciding was done below and the conscious mind was merely informed of the result. Think of how often your mind is made up before you think about it, and how the thinking that follows the decision is not the cause of the decision, but its justification. You do not need to measure any depth tonight. Let the island rest on the ocean, and know that the I you carry through the day is the smallest part of a much larger self. And the larger self, invisible and operational, is the one that has been shaping your life all along. It runs your life without your knowledge. It runs your life without your knowledge. And this is the secret that most people find hardest to accept, that the choices they believe are freely made, the preferences they believe are authentically theirs, the reactions they believe are proportional and justified, are all influenced, shaped, and frequently determined by an unconscious mind they have never examined. You did not freely choose your partner. The unconscious selected them, based on criteria you are not aware of. You did not freely develop your personality. The unconscious shaped it, around wounds and compensations you have not examined. You did not freely form your beliefs. The unconscious installed them, from the environment you absorbed before you had the capacity to filter. The running is not occasional. It is constant. The unconscious operating in every moment, in every interaction, in every decision. As the primary driver of a life, the conscious mind believes it is steering. Think of the patterns in your life, the recurring themes, the repeated relationships, the persistent problems that seem to follow you regardless of circumstances, and consider that the recurring is not bad luck, but the unconscious faithfully producing its program. The same script running on the same hardware, producing the same results in every new context. You do not need to examine any program tonight. Let the running rest, and know that the life you are living is the product of a mind you have not met, running a program you did not write. And the program, once you learn to read it, can be changed. It never sleeps, even when you do. It never sleeps, even when you do. And this is one of the most practically important secrets about the unconscious, that the mind, beneath your mind, does not shut down when you close your eyes. It activates. Sleep is the unconscious mind's most productive period, the hours during which the conscious mind, the gatekeeper, the censor, the controller, steps aside, and the unconscious, freed from management, goes to work, processing the day's experiences, producing dreams, sending messages, and performing the psychological maintenance that the waking hours do not allow. The dreams you have tonight are not random firings. They are the unconscious mind's communications, its reports, its warnings, its attempts to bring to your attention the things you have been too busy or too defended to notice during the day. Jung saw sleep as the time when the unconscious has its most direct access to you, and the access, which the waking ego spends all day restricting, produces the dreams, the insights, and the emotional processing that keep the psyche in balance. Think of how different you feel after a night of vivid dreams, and how the dreams, however strange, seem to process something the waking mind was carrying, and how the processing, done in the dark, leaves you lighter in the morning. You do not need to process anything tonight. Let the unconscious work, as it always does, and know that the mind that never sleeps is about to begin its most important work of the day, using the hours you are about to give it to tend to the parts of your psyche that the daylight could not reach. It remembers what you have forgotten. It remembers what you have forgotten. And this is one of the unconscious mind's most remarkable and most unsettling qualities, that nothing is ever truly forgotten. The memory that faded from your conscious recall did not vanish. It descended, dropping below the threshold of awareness into the unconscious, where it continues to exist, fully intact, fully charged, and fully capable of influencing your present behavior from a position you cannot see. The childhood experience you cannot recall is still shaping your relationships. The trauma you do not remember is still generating your anxiety. The joy you forgot is still informing your sense of what happiness feels like. The unconscious forgets nothing because it was never designed to forget. It was designed to store. And the storage, because it is permanent, means that every experience you have ever had, from birth to this moment, exists in the unconscious as a living, active, influential presence. Think of a reaction you have that seems to have no source, an emotion that arrives without a trigger, a preference that has no explanation, and consider that the source, the trigger, the explanation, exists in the unconscious, in a memory you do not know you have, influencing you from a depth you have never reached. You do not need to remember anything tonight. Let the forgotten rest, stored and active, and know that the past you think you left behind is not behind you. It is below you, in a memory that never fades, held by a mind that never forgets. It knows what you will not admit. It knows what you will not admit. And this is the shadow aspect of the unconscious, the uncomfortable truth that the mind, beneath your mind, holds not only what you have forgotten but what you have refused, the desires you have denied, the qualities you have rejected, the truths about yourself you have declared unacceptable and sent underground. The unconscious knows you are angry when you insist you are calm. It knows you are afraid when you perform courage. It knows you want what you claim not to want and despise what you secretly admire. The knowledge is not a judgment. It is a record, the complete, unedited version of who you are, held without censorship in a mind that does not share the ego's need for a flattering self-portrait. Jung called the collection of these denied truths the shadow. And the shadow, because it contains everything the ego rejected, is the most honest part of the psyche, the part that knows what you really feel, really want, and really are, beneath the version you show the world. Think of what you will not admit, even to yourself, and know that the unconscious already knows it, has always known it, and is holding it without judgment, waiting for the moment you are ready to face what you have been hiding. You do not need to admit anything tonight. Let the shadow rest, known and unjudged, and know that the unconscious mind's honesty is not cruelty, but completeness. The holding of the whole truth in a place that does not need the truth to be comfortable. It has its own intelligence. It has its own intelligence, and this is one of Jung's most radical claims about the unconscious, that it is not a primitive, chaotic, irrational basement, but a sophisticated, purposeful, intelligent system with its own logic, its own goals, and its own wisdom that is often superior to the conscious minds. The unconscious does not merely store and react. It evaluates, it compensates, it corrects, it balances. When the conscious mind goes too far in one direction, the unconscious produces a compensating movement in the other. When the ego becomes too rigid, the unconscious sends dreams that soften. When the personality becomes too one-sided, the unconscious generates symptoms that force attention to the neglected side. The intelligence is not human intelligence. It is older, more instinctual, more connected to the body and to the natural world, and its logic, which does not follow the conscious mind's linear reasoning, operates in images, in feelings, in synchronicities, and in the language of symbol. Think of a time a dream gave you an insight the waking mind could not reach, or an intuition proved more accurate than your analysis, and consider that the intelligence behind the dream or the intuition was the unconscious, operating with a wisdom the conscious mind does not possess. You do not need to consult any intelligence tonight. Let the unconscious think, as it always does, and know that the mind beneath your mind is not only larger than your conscious self, but in many ways wiser, seeing what you cannot see, knowing what you do not know, and guiding you, quietly, toward a balance your ego would never choose on its own. It speaks a language you were never taught. It speaks a language you were never taught, and the language is symbol, image, metaphor, and feeling. The pre-verbal, pre-rational communication system the unconscious uses because it predates language and does not need words to convey its meaning. The dreams that confuse you are not confused. They are fluent, spoken in a language your conscious mind does not read. And the not reading is not the dream's failure, but the conscious mind's limitation, the inability to translate a message that was written in images into a medium that processes words. Jung spent his life learning to read this language, developing the method of amplification, the comparison of dream images to mythological and cultural parallels that reveal the symbolic meaning the image carries. The snake in your dream is not a snake. It is a symbol, carrying meanings that stretch back through millennia of human experience, and the meanings, layered and rich, communicate something about your psyche that no sentence could capture. Think of a dream image that stayed with you, vivid and unexplained, and consider that the image was a word in a language you were never taught, carrying a meaning you could feel but not articulate. You do not need to translate anything tonight. Let the symbols rest, spoken and unread, and know that the unconscious has been speaking to you your entire life, and the speaking, though you have rarely understood it, has been shaping you nonetheless. The way a conversation you overhear in a foreign language can change your mood without your understanding a word. It has been trying to reach you. It has been trying to reach you. And this is perhaps the most moving secret about the unconscious, that it is not indifferent to your conscious life, but actively, persistently, patiently attempting to communicate with you, sending dreams you ignore, producing symptoms you treat without understanding, generating feelings you suppress, and creating synchronicities you dismiss as coincidence. All of it, the unconscious's sustained, lifelong effort to bring to your attention the things you most need to see. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is not a chaotic force trying to disrupt your life. It is a partner, an ally, a guide that sees further than you can see and knows more than you can know. And its attempts to reach you, however strange and however unwelcome, are always in service of your wholeness, always pointing toward the parts of yourself you have neglected, always trying to complete what the conscious life has left incomplete. Think of the dreams that recur, the feelings that persist, the patterns that repeat, and consider that each one is the unconscious knocking on the door of your awareness, trying to deliver a message you have not yet opened. You do not need to open any message tonight. Let the knocking rest, and know that the mind beneath your mind has been trying to reach you for your entire life. And the trying, however unsuccessful, has never stopped, because the unconscious does not give up on the person it lives inside, even when the person has never given it a single moment of attention. You are the surface, it is the ocean. You are the surface, it is the ocean. And this is Jung's most comprehensive image of the relationship between the conscious and the unconscious, the understanding that what you call yourself, your name, your identity, your personality, your conscious experience of being you, is the thin, visible, weather-affected surface of an ocean so deep and so vast that no conscious exploration could ever fully map it. The surface has waves, storms, calm days, and the weather of the surface is what you experience as your daily emotional life. The ocean beneath has currents, tides, ecosystems, and depths that the surface cannot feel. And the currents, though invisible from above, move the surface, shape its weather, and determine, far more than the wind, what the surface does. You live on the surface. You identify with the surface. And the surface, because it is all you can see, becomes the whole of what you believe you are. But the ocean is also you, the vast, dark, unexplored, infinitely rich interior that you carry with you everywhere, and that carries you, the surface resting on the depth the way a leaf rests on water. Think of yourself as the leaf, and the water as the unconscious, and how the leaf, which believes it is sailing itself, is actually being carried. You do not need to dive tonight. Let the surface rest on the ocean, and know that the depths are yours, as much as the surface, and the depths, though you may never fully explore them, are the foundation on which everything you experience rests. The mind you are about to meet. The mind you are about to meet is the whole of this tier gathered into a single, quiet invitation. The opening of a door you may never have known existed. The door to the unconscious mind that has been running your life, storing your memories, holding your shadow, speaking in symbols, and trying to reach you, patiently, for your entire life. Tonight is the meeting. Not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet introduction. The beginning of an acquaintance with the largest, oldest, wisest part of yourself, a part that has been with you since birth, and that will be with you until the end. And that has been waiting, all this time, for the conscious mind to turn its attention inward and acknowledge that it is not alone in here, that there is another intelligence, another presence, another mind, and the mind is not foreign. It is yours. Think of the meeting as already happening, here, in the dark, in the drowsy state where the conscious mind's defenses are low and the unconscious's communications are at their clearest, and how the meeting, which sounds dramatic, is actually the simplest thing, the quietest thing, the mere willingness to notice what has always been there. You do not need to meet any mind tonight, but you are meeting it right now in the space between waking and sleeping, in the images that are beginning to form, in the feelings that are arriving without causes, in the quiet, ancient, patient presence that is, and has always been, the largest part of who you are. The shadow you have been carrying. The shadow you have been carrying is the collection of everything about yourself that you have rejected, denied, or declared unacceptable, placed in the unconscious not because it does not exist, but because the ego decided it should not. And the placing, which felt like a removal, was actually a relocation. The rejected quality moving from the conscious mind into the unconscious, where it continues to live with all its original force. The shadow contains your anger if you decided anger was wrong, your selfishness if you decided selfishness was shameful, your ambition if you decided ambition was dangerous, your sexuality if you decided sexuality was dirty. Each rejected quality was placed in the shadow by a specific decision, often made in childhood, often made under pressure. And the decision, once made, was forgotten. But the quality, sent below, was not. It grew in the dark, gaining the intensity that denied things always gain, And the intensity, when it leaks through the ego's defenses, appears as the moments you do not recognize yourself, the outbursts, the fascinations, the reactions that seem to come from someone else. Think of the part of yourself you most reject, and know that the rejecting did not eliminate it. It energized it. And the energized thing, living in your unconscious, is pressing upward right now, looking for the crack in the ego's wall that will let it through. You do not need to face any shadow tonight. Let it rest, carried and denied, and know that Jung saw the shadow not as your worst self, but as your hidden self. And the hidden, once brought into the light, is often not as dark as the hiding made it seem. The person you were told not to be. The person you were told not to be is the version of yourself that was suppressed by the messages of your upbringing. The qualities your family, your culture, and your environment communicated were unacceptable, and that you, absorbing the messages before you could evaluate them, obediently exiled into the unconscious. Do not be loud. Do not be needy. Do not be angry. Do not be too much. Each instruction was a piece of yourself being sent underground, and the underground, which received each piece without complaint, now holds a complete person. The person you were told not to be, living in the unconscious as an alternative version of you, the version that includes everything the approved version excludes. Jung saw this suppressed person as one of the most important contents of the unconscious because the suppressed person carries the vitality, the energy, the aliveness that the approved version lacks, and the lacking is what produces the flatness, the depression, the sense of something missing that many people carry without understanding its source. Think of the qualities you were taught to suppress and how the suppressing drains something from your life that the approved version cannot replace. You do not need to become anyone tonight. Let the suppressed person rest, complete, and waiting, and know that the person you were told not to be is not your worst self, but your denied self. And the denied self, carrying everything the approved self is missing, may be the key to the aliveness you have been searching for. The desire you buried so deep you forgot. The desire you buried so deep you forgot is the want that was once conscious and that, through repeated denial, sank below the threshold of awareness until the wanting itself was forgotten, leaving only its effects, the unnamed dissatisfaction, the vague longing, the sense that something is missing from a life that should, by all accounts, be complete. The desire did not disappear when you stopped acknowledging it. It descended, joining the other contents of the unconscious, and from its position below awareness, it continues to generate the longing you feel, but cannot name, the ache that has no object, the reaching for something you cannot identify because the identification was the first thing to go. Jung saw buried desire as one of the primary sources of neurotic suffering, the person aching for something they have forgotten they want, unable to address the ache, because the address, the name of the desire, has been lost to repression. Think of the dissatisfaction you carry that has no name, and consider that the name exists in the unconscious, attached to a desire you buried so thoroughly you forgot it was ever there. You do not need to name any desire tonight. Let the buried rest, unnamed and aching, and know that the longing you cannot explain is the unconscious remembering what the conscious mind. The memory that shaped you invisibly. The memory that shaped you invisibly is the experience from your past, often early, often pre-verbal, that installed a pattern in your psyche so deep that the pattern operates without any conscious memory of the experience that created it. You do not remember the moment your mother's face withdrew and your nervous system learned that love is unreliable. You do not remember the tone that taught you authority is dangerous. You do not remember the incident that installed the belief that you are not enough. But the pattern, installed by the forgotten memory, runs continuously, producing reactions, choices, and relationships that faithfully reproduce the original experience without your understanding why. Jung saw these invisible memories as the foundation of the personal unconscious, the layer of experience that was lived but not consciously processed, and that operates now, in adulthood, with the same force it had in childhood, because the unconscious does not age. It does not mature. The memory that was stored at age 3 operates at age 3's level of understanding, regardless of the adult intelligence sitting above it. Think of a pattern in your life that has no explanation, and know that the explanation exists, stored in a memory you cannot access, shaping you from a depth you cannot reach. You do not need to retrieve any memory tonight. Let the invisible rest, shaping and silent, and know that the past you do not remember is the past that is running the most. The emotion you locked away. The emotion you locked away is the feeling that was too dangerous, too overwhelming, or too unacceptable to be experienced at the time it arose, and that was placed in the unconscious intact, preserved in the exact state it was in at the moment of the locking. And that remains there now, unchanged, unprocessed, and fully charged, waiting for the moment, which may never come, when it is safe enough to be finally felt. The locked emotion does not lose its charge over time. It gains charge, because the energy that would have been discharged through expression is retained, building pressure in the unconscious the way steam builds in a sealed container. The grief that was not grieved becomes a pressurized grief. The rage that was not expressed becomes a concentrated rage. The terror that was not felt becomes a stored terror. Each one is waiting, not patiently, but pressuredly, for the opening that will allow the discharge. Think of an emotion you locked away and how long ago the locking occurred, and how the emotion, despite the years, has not diminished but intensified, because the locking did not process it. It preserved it. You do not need to unlock anything tonight. Let the sealed rest, pressurized and preserved, and know that the emotions you locked away are the emotions that most need to be felt. And the needing, though it frightens you, is the unconscious's honest assessment of what your psyche requires. The talent that was never safe to show. The talent that was never safe to show is the ability, the gift, the natural capacity that you carried but could not express because the environment punished, ignored, or discouraged its expression. And that descended into the unconscious, where it lives as potential energy, unused but not absent, available but inaccessible, the talent equivalent of the locked emotion. Jung saw denied talent as one of the most toxic contents of the unconscious, not because talent is dangerous, but because talent denied generates resentment, bitterness, and a specific, recognizable kind of depression. The depression of a person who is not doing what they were built to do. The talent is in the unconscious, pressing upward, asking to be used, and the not using, sustained, over years, produces not acceptance but a slow poisoning, the creative energy turning toxic when it has nowhere to go. Think of the talent you set down and how long ago you set it down, and how the setting down was not a clean release, but an ongoing burial. The talent still alive, still asking. You do not need to unearth anything tonight. Let the talent rest, buried and alive, and know that the gift that was never safe to show is still inside you, waiting not for permission, but for the moment you decide that your own expression matters more than the safety that the hiding provides. The wound that went underground. The wound that went underground is the injury that was too painful to process at the time it occurred, and that was sent to the unconscious not because it healed, but because the psyche could not afford to feel it and continue functioning. The wound went underground, the way a broken bone goes into a cast, immobilized rather than healed, and the immobilizing, which allowed the person to keep moving, did not fix the break. It preserved it in its original, unhealed state, below the level of awareness, where it continues to influence everything. The way a broken bone in a cast continues to send pain signals even when the person has learned to ignore them. Jung saw the underground wound as one of the primary generators of neurotic symptoms, the unhealed injury producing anxiety, depression, phobias, and relational patterns that are the surface expressions of a depth the person cannot reach. Think of a wound you know you carry but cannot access, a hurt that shapes your life from a place you cannot see. You do not need to heal anything tonight. Let the wound rest, underground and persistent, and know that the wound's descent was not healing but storage. And the storage, while it allowed you to function, has kept the injury in its original state, waiting for the moment when the psyche is ready to go back and finish the healing it could not complete the first time. The archetype that lives in you. The archetype that lives in you is a pattern from the collective unconscious, a universal template for human experience that has been shaping your psyche since before you were born. The mother archetype, the hero archetype, the shadow, the wise old man, the child. Each one is a pre-formed pattern of behavior, perception, and meaning that exists in the deepest layer of the unconscious, inherited not through personal experience but through the biological inheritance of the species. You did not learn these patterns. They were installed, the way instincts are installed, and they operate with the same automatic, unquestionable authority that instincts have, producing feelings, images, and behaviors that feel deeply personal, but are actually universal. The archetype is not a memory. It is a tendency, a readiness to experience the world in a particular way. And the readiness, when activated by life experience, produces the powerful, numinous, larger-than-life feelings that accompany the great transitions: falling in love, becoming a parent, facing death, encountering the divine. Think of a moment when you felt something larger than your personal life, something archetypal, and how the feeling carried an authority that your ordinary emotions do not. You do not need to identify any archetype tonight. Let the patterns rest, ancient and active, and know that the archetypes are the unconscious mind's deepest furniture, the shapes that human experience naturally takes when it is allowed to be fully, deeply, archetypally. The ancestor you have never met. The ancestor you have never met is the presence in the collective unconscious that carries the accumulated experience of the humans who came before you. The layer of the unconscious that is not personal but ancestral, not biographical but biological, containing the residue of 100,000 years of human living, dying, loving, fearing, and surviving. Jung saw this layer as the deepest stratum of the unconscious, the place where individual psychology meets species psychology. And the meeting produces the universal dreams, the universal symbols, and the universal fears that every human being shares, regardless of culture. The ancestor is not a person. It is a deposit, the psychological sediment of countless lives, and the sediment, layered in the unconscious like geological strata, influences your experience with a weight and an authority that no personal experience can match. Think of a fear you carry that has no personal source, a reverence you feel that was never taught, a knowing that arrived without learning, and consider that the source may be ancestral, carried in the unconscious from a time before your biography began. You do not need to trace any lineage tonight. Let the ancestor rest, unknown and influential, and know that you carry within you the psychological inheritance of every human being who has ever lived. And the inheritance, though you may never fully access it, shapes your experience of being alive in ways that your personal history alone could never explain. The gold mixed in with the dark. The gold mixed in with the dark is Jung's most hopeful insight about the unconscious, the observation that the shadow does not only contain the rejected darkness, it also contains the rejected light, the positive qualities, the strengths, the capacities, the talents that were suppressed along with the negative ones, and that wait in the unconscious alongside the darkness, available to be reclaimed by anyone willing to enter the dark and sort through it. The gold is in the shadow because the ego's rejection process is not precise. It does not surgically remove only the negative. It sweeps broadly, sending everything threatening underground. And the threatening includes not only the dark qualities, but the bright ones. The creativity that was too disruptive, the power that was too dangerous, the joy that was too visible. The gold is mixed with the dark, and the mixing means that the person who avoids the shadow avoids not only their worst, but their best. And the avoiding keeps both buried. Think of the qualities you most admire in others, and ask whether they might exist in your own shadow, denied not because they are bad, but because they are too powerful for the ego to contain. You do not need to sort any gold tonight. Let it rest, mixed and waiting, and know that the unconscious holds not only what you fear about yourself, but what you have not yet dared to claim. The dream figure you keep meeting. The dream figure you keep meeting is the recurring character in your dreams, the person who appears again and again, sometimes familiar and sometimes a stranger, who is not a memory of a real person, but a representation of an unconscious content, a part of yourself that has taken human form in the dream world because the unconscious communicates through images. And the most natural image for a psychological quality is a person. The figure may be the shadow, appearing as a threatening or despised character. It may be the anima or animus, appearing as a fascinating or beloved figure. It may be the self, appearing as a wise guide or a numinous presence. Each recurring figure is an invitation from the unconscious, an ongoing attempt to introduce you to a part of yourself you have not yet met. And the recurrence is the urgency, the unconscious sending the same figure again and again because the message has not been received. Think of the figure who appears in your dreams repeatedly, and how the appearing has always felt meaningful without your understanding why. You do not need to interpret any dream tonight. Let the figure rest, recurring and patient, and know that the person you keep meeting in your dreams is you, a part of you that has taken a form you can see, speaking to you in the only language available, waiting for the meeting that happens not in the dream, but in the waking recognition that follows. The self you have not yet become is one of the most remarkable contents of the unconscious, the potential, the future version, the not yet realized person who exists in the unconscious as a blueprint, a destination, a pull toward wholeness that Jung called the process of individuation. The unconscious does not only hold the past, it holds the future, not as a prediction but as a potential, the image of who you could become if the conscious mind cooperated with the unconscious drive toward completion. The self you have not yet become is already inside you, fully formed as a potential, exerting a pull that you experience as longing, as restlessness, as the feeling that you are not yet who you are supposed to be. Jung saw this pull as the most important force in the psyche, the teleological drive, the purposeful movement toward a wholeness that the conscious mind does not plan, but that the unconscious, from its deeper perspective, can see. Think of the pull you feel towards something you cannot name, the sense that you are becoming something you cannot yet see. And know that the becoming is not random but directed, guided by an unconscious that holds the image of who you are meant to be. You do not need to become anything tonight. Let the potential rest, and know that the self you have not yet become is already present, waiting in the depths for the conscious life to catch up. The depth that holds everything. The depth that holds everything is the whole of this tier gathered into a single, awe-filled recognition that the unconscious holds the entirety of your psychological life. The shadow and the gold, the wounds and the talents, the memories and the potentials, the personal and the ancestral, the past and the future, all of it held in a depth so vast that the conscious mind, with its narrow beam of awareness, can only ever illuminate a fraction of what is there. The depth is not a threat. It is a resource, the largest, richest, most comprehensive resource you have ever had access to. And the access, which most people never attempt, is available to anyone willing to turn the light of attention inward and begin the slow, patient, lifelong work of exploring what lives below. Think of everything this tier has described: the shadow, the buried desires, the locked emotions, the denied talents, the underground wounds, the archetypes, the ancestors, the gold, the dream figures, the future self, and know that all of it is inside you right now, held in a depth that does not judge, does not censor, and does not forget. You do not need to explore any depth tonight. Let it all rest, held and waiting, and know that the unconscious, which holds everything, holds it for you, patiently, until you are ready to meet what it has been carrying. Your dreams are letters from below. Your dreams are letters from below. And Jung saw them not as random neural firings, but as deliberate, purposeful communications from the unconscious to the conscious mind. Each dream, a carefully composed message, using the only medium the unconscious has available, which is the image. The dream is not speaking in code to confuse you. It is speaking in its native language, which is symbol. And the symbol, while it does not translate neatly into words, carries a richness of meaning that words alone could never match. A single dream image can contain the condensation of an entire psychological situation. The compressed expression of a conflict, a desire, a warning, or a potential that the conscious mind has been too busy or too defended to register during the day. Jung treated every dream as a communication worth receiving, approaching each one with the question, "What is the unconscious trying to tell me?" rather than Freud's question, "What is the unconscious trying to hide?" The difference is enormous, because Jung's question treats the unconscious as an ally with important information, while Freud's treats it as a censor with embarrassing secrets. And the treating determines what you find. Think of a dream that stayed with you and how the staying was the urgency, the unconscious holding the image in your awareness longer than usual because the message was important. You do not need to read any letters tonight. Let the dreams come, as they always come, and know that the images arriving as you fall asleep are not nonsense. They are correspondence, sent from the deepest part of yourself, addressed to the part of you that is still awake enough to notice them arriving. The symptom is the unconscious talking. The symptom is the unconscious talking. And Jung saw every psychological symptom, every anxiety, every phobia, every compulsion, every depression, not as a malfunction to be eliminated, but as a communication to be understood. The symptom is not the problem. The symptom is the unconscious's description of the problem, expressed through the body and the emotions, because the conscious mind has closed every other channel. The anxiety is not a disorder. It is a message about something that needs attention. The depression is not a chemical accident. It is a descent, demanded by a psyche that has been living too much on the surface. The phobia is not irrational. It is a symbol. The irrational fear, pointing at a rational wound that the conscious mind has refused to face. Jung did not dismiss symptoms. He listened to them, the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat, not to make it stop, but to understand what it is saying. And the listening, when it is genuine, often resolves the symptom not by treating it, but by receiving the message it was trying to deliver. Think of a symptom you carry and ask what it might be saying, what part of your life it is protesting, what need it is expressing, through the only available voice. You do not need to decode any symptom tonight. Let the message rest, delivered and waiting, and know that the unconscious, when it is not heard through dreams and through feelings, will eventually be heard through the body. And the body's speaking, while uncomfortable, is the most honest report the psyche can produce. The slip that told the truth. The slip that told the truth is the Freudian slip, claimed by Freud, but deepened by Jung. The moment when the unconscious breaks through the ego's control and says, through the mouth of the conscious person, what the conscious person was trying not to say. You call your new partner by your ex's name. You say the opposite of what you mean. You forget the name of the person you resent. Each slip is a crack in the ego's management, a moment when the unconscious, which is always pushing toward expression, finds a gap in the defenses and pushes through, producing a truth the conscious mind would never have allowed if it had been given the chance to edit. The slip feels like an accident. It is not. It is the unconscious seizing a moment of inattention to deliver a piece of information the ego has been suppressing, and the information, because it was suppressed, is almost always more true than whatever the ego was trying to say instead. Think of your most embarrassing slip and what it revealed, and how the revealing, though mortifying, was more honest than the performance it interrupted. You do not need to monitor any speech tonight. Let the slips rest, and know that the tongue, when it slips, is not failing. It is telling the truth in the only way the unconscious can, by hijacking the one instrument the ego thought it controlled. The mood that arrived from nowhere. The mood that arrived from nowhere is the unconscious expressing itself through emotion. The sudden shift in feeling that has no external cause, no triggering event, no rational explanation, arriving like weather from an invisible climate, changing the entire atmosphere of your inner world without providing any clue about where it came from. Jung saw causeless moods as one of the most reliable indicators that the unconscious is active, pushing content upward toward awareness, and the content, because it has not yet formed into a thought or an image, arrives first as a feeling, a mood, a vague emotional coloring that tints everything without explaining anything. The mood is not the content. It is the announcement of the content, the emotional weather preceding the psychological event, the way thunder precedes lightning. The content will arrive later, in a dream, in a thought, in a sudden insight. But the mood arrives first, preparing the psyche for what is coming by changing its emotional state. Think of a mood that arrived from nowhere, and how, hours or days later, something emerged, an insight, a memory, a recognition that the mood was preparing you for. You do not need to trace any mood tonight. Let the feeling rest, arrive from its unknown source, and know that the mood that has no cause has a source, and the source is the unconscious, sending its advanced signal through the only channel that does not require the ego's permission to use. The coincidence that was not random is what Jung called synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence, the moment when an outer event corresponds to an inner state in a way that cannot be explained by causation but that carries a significance that causation alone could never produce. You think of someone and they call. You dream of a symbol and encounter it the next day. You make a decision and the world seems to rearrange itself around the decision, providing resources, removing obstacles, opening doors that no plan could have opened. Jung did not claim that synchronicity was supernatural. He claimed it was a manifestation of the underlying unity between the psyche and the physical world, the moments when the division between inner and outer becomes transparent, and the correspondence between what you are thinking and what is happening reveals a connection that the rational mind cannot account for, but that the unconscious recognizes instantly. Think of a coincidence that felt meaningful, that seemed too precise to be random, and how the meaning, though you could not prove it, was more real than any rational explanation. You do not need to find any meaning tonight. Let the coincidences rest, meaningful and unexplained, and know that Jung saw synchronicity as the unconscious's most spectacular form of communication, the moment when the inner and the outer speak the same word at the same time. The image that stayed after waking. The image that stayed after waking is the dream fragment that survived the crossing from sleep to consciousness. The single image, face, scene, or feeling that persisted through the waking, refusing to dissolve the way most dream material dissolves, and that sits in your awareness for hours, vivid and unexplained. Jung saw these persistent images as the unconscious's priority messages, the communications so important that the unconscious gave them extra charge, extra vividness, extra staying power, ensuring they would survive the transition from the dream world to the waking one. The image that stays is not random. It is selected, chosen by the unconscious from the full content of the night's dreaming as the one image most worth remembering, the one piece of the night's communication that the unconscious most needs you to carry into the day. Think of an image that stayed with you after waking and how the staying was the importance, the unconscious refusing to let the message fade. You do not need to hold any image tonight. Let the waking come when it comes, and know that if an image survives the crossing, the surviving is the message. The unconscious saying, "This one matters, hold on to this one. This is the letter I most need you to read." The feeling your body knew first. The feeling your body knew first is the somatic intelligence of the unconscious, the knowledge that arrives in the body before it arrives in the mind, the gut feeling, the tight chest, the clenched jaw, the inexplicable unease that your physical self registers while your mental self is still processing. Jung saw the body as the unconscious mind's most direct instrument, the place where unconscious knowledge is felt before it is thought, and the feeling, because it bypasses the conscious mind's processing, is often faster and more accurate than any rational analysis. The body knows before the mind agrees, because the unconscious, which has access to information the conscious mind has filtered out, communicates through the body's sensations, using the physical as a channel for the psychological. Think of a time your body warned you, the knot in the stomach, the hair on the neck, the feeling of wrongness that had no rational basis, but that turned out to be right. You do not need to listen to any body tonight. Let the physical rest, and know that the body's wisdom is the unconscious speaking in its most primitive and most reliable language. A language older than words, faster than thoughts, and more trustworthy than any analysis your conscious mind has ever produced. The fascination that points at you. The fascination that points at you is the unconscious projecting its contents onto the outer world. The things that fascinate you, obsess you, captivate you, and repel you, each one a mirror, reflecting something from the unconscious that you have not yet recognized as yours. Jung saw fascination and repulsion as the two poles of projection, the unconscious placing its contents onto external objects and then experiencing those contents as qualities of the objects rather than as qualities of itself. The movie that moves you deeply is moving something inside you. The person who fascinates you is carrying your projection. The topic you cannot stop reading about is a topic that corresponds to an unconscious content that is pressing for recognition. The fascination is the unconscious waving a flag saying, "Look here, this is yours, this quality, this energy, this potential," placed on something external because you are not yet ready to see it as internal. Think of what fascinates you most and ask what the fascination is pointing at, what internal quality the external object is carrying on your behalf. You do not need to reclaim any projection tonight. Let the fascination rest, and know that the things that captivate you are showing you yourself, reflected on the surface of the world by an unconscious that has placed its contents wherever you are most likely to notice them. The person who triggers you is a message. The person who triggers you is a message from the unconscious, the strong emotional reaction you have to certain people, the disproportionate irritation, the instant dislike, the inexplicable attraction. Each one a sign that the person is carrying your projection, embodying a quality that lives in your unconscious and that you are seeing in them rather than in yourself. The trigger is the clue. The strength of your reaction is proportional to the strength of the unconscious content being projected. And the strength, because it is disproportionate to the situation, is the signal that something is coming from inside rather than from outside. Jung saw every strong emotional reaction to another person as an opportunity for self-knowledge. the chance to ask, what does this reaction tell me about myself, rather than what does this person's behavior tell me about them? Think of the person who triggers you most, and consider that the trigger's heat is generated not by them, but by the unconscious content they are carrying for you. You do not need to examine any trigger tonight. Let the reactions rest, and know that the person who triggers you is an unconscious delivery service, bringing you a message about yourself that could not have been delivered any other way. The repetition is the message repeating. The repetition is the message repeating. And Jung saw recurring patterns, recurring dreams, recurring relationships, recurring situations, as the unconscious delivering the same message again and again, because the message has not been received. The unconscious does not give up. It does not send a message once and accept the silence. It sends the same message through different channels, in different forms, with increasing urgency, until the conscious mind finally receives it, or until the non-receiving produces a symptom loud enough to force attention. The recurring dream is the same letter sent nightly. The recurring relationship pattern is the same drama staged with different actors. The recurring situation is the same lesson offered in different classrooms. The repetition is not bad luck. It is persistence, the unconscious refusing to abandon a communication the conscious mind has refused to accept. Think of the pattern that keeps repeating in your life, and ask what message the pattern might be carrying, what the unconscious has been trying to tell you through the repetition. You do not need to break any pattern tonight. Let the repetition rest, persistent and patient, and know that the pattern will continue to repeat until the message it carries is received. And the receiving, which requires only attention and honesty, is the thing that finally makes the repetition unnecessary. The intuition you should have trusted. The intuition you should have trusted is the unconscious's summary judgment, the rapid, pre-conscious assessment of a situation that arrives as a feeling rather than a thought. And that is, more often than the conscious mind would like to admit, more accurate than the careful analysis that follows it. The intuition is not magic. It is the unconscious processing information that the conscious mind has not yet noticed, data too subtle for conscious detection but perfectly visible to the vast pattern-recognizing system that runs below awareness. The intuition knows before you know, because it has access to more information and processes it faster. And the knowing, which arrives without explanation, without justification, without the step-by-step reasoning the conscious mind demands, is the unconscious's best guess delivered as a feeling. Think of the times you had a feeling about something and ignored it, and how the ignoring cost you, because the feeling, which seemed irrational, turned out to be the most rational response available, produced by a mind with better data and faster processing than the one you trusted instead. You do not need to trust any intuition tonight. Let the gut rest, and know that the unconscious speaks through intuition with an accuracy the conscious mind cannot match, and the speaking, when it is finally trusted, produces decisions that no amount of analysis could improve. The whisper beneath the noise. The whisper beneath the noise is the quiet, persistent, easily missed communication from the unconscious that runs beneath the loud, busy, demanding surface of your daily conscious life. The subtle signal that gets drowned out by the noise of the day, but that, in the quiet of the night, in the stillness of this moment, can finally be heard. The whisper is always there. It has been there all day, every day, for your entire life, carrying the unconscious's communications beneath the traffic of your conscious thoughts, and the not hearing was never because the whisper stopped, but because the noise was louder. The quiet is where the whisper becomes audible, and the audible is where the unconscious finally has its chance to be heard. Think of this moment, this specific, quiet, dark moment, and how the quiet has made something available that the day's noise was covering. A feeling, a thought, an image, something from below that could not reach you while you were being busy. You do not need to listen for anything tonight. Let the whisper arrive, if it will, in the quiet you are already in, and know that the unconscious has been speaking beneath the noise for your entire life. And the night, every night, is the time it speaks most clearly, because the night is when the noise finally stops, and the whisper, patient and present, can at last be heard. The language you are learning tonight. The language you are learning tonight is the language of the unconscious itself, the communication system that speaks through dreams, symptoms, moods, slips, coincidences, fascinations, triggers, repetitions, intuitions, and the whisper beneath the noise, All of it, a single, coherent language that the conscious mind was never taught and that you are right now, in this quiet dark, beginning to learn. The learning is not intellectual. It is attentional. The shift from ignoring the unconscious's communications to noticing them, from dismissing the dream to holding it, from suppressing the mood to feeling it, from explaining the coincidence to wondering at it. The language does not require translation. It requires attention, the willingness to sit with the image, the feeling, the symbol, without demanding that it explain itself in words. And the sitting, patient and receptive, is the learning. And the learning, once begun, is never finished. Because the unconscious, which has been speaking all your life, has a lifetime of unsent messages waiting for someone who has finally learned to listen. You do not need to learn anything tonight. Let the language rest, spoken and beginning to be heard. And know that the mind beneath your mind has been fluent in this language since before you were born. And the fluency, which is its, is becoming, slowly. The complex that hijacks you. The complex that hijacks you is an autonomous fragment of the psyche, a cluster of emotions, memories, and behavioral patterns that operates independently of the ego, activating in response to a trigger and temporarily taking over your personality so completely that you say things you do not mean, do things you do not intend, and feel things that are disproportionate to the situation. Jung invented the word complex to describe these psychological splinters, and the word has entered common language, but the reality it describes is far more dramatic than the casual usage suggests. A complex is not a concern or a preoccupation. It is a seizure, a moment when the ego loses control and the complex drives, producing reactions that the person, once the complex releases them, often cannot explain or even remember clearly. The complex has its own emotional logic, its own memories, its own agenda. And when it is activated, its agenda replaces the ego's, and the person becomes, temporarily, someone else. Think of a moment when you were possessed by a reaction you did not choose, a rage, a panic, a collapse, and how the reaction felt like an invasion, like someone else was driving, and how the someone else was the complex, a piece of your own psyche operating autonomously from below. You do not need to identify any complex tonight. Let the hijacking rest, and know that the moments when you are not yourself are the moments when the unconscious is most visible. The complex surfacing to drive the personality in directions the ego never chose. The reaction that is not yours. The reaction that is not yours is the emotional response that belongs not to the present situation but to the past. 1. The present is echoing, the disproportionate feeling triggered by a harmless event, because the event matches, in some felt, pre-verbal way, the shape of an old wound. The reaction is real. The emotion is genuine. But the intensity belongs to the past, and the present, which triggered it, is merely the key that fit the old lock. Jung saw these displaced reactions as the unconscious breaking into the present through the crack of resemblance, the old wound surfacing because the current moment looks enough like the original moment to activate the stored response. The person experiencing the reaction does not know it is displaced. They believe the intensity belongs to the present, and the believing produces confusion, because the response does not match the situation. And the not matching, rather than alerting them to the displacement, produces the feeling that they are overreacting, which adds shame to the already disproportionate emotion. Think of a reaction you had that surprised you with its intensity, and consider that the intensity was not for the present but for the past, the old wound firing through the present moment's trigger. You do not need to sort any reactions tonight. Let the displaced rest, fired and fading, and know that the unconscious does not distinguish between the past and the present when the two look alike. The automatic response. You cannot stop. The automatic response you cannot stop is the behavior pattern that has been so deeply installed in the unconscious that it operates before the conscious mind has any chance to intervene. The reaction that fires faster than the thought that should precede it. The response that is completed before you are aware it has begun. The automatic response was once a conscious choice. At some point, in response to a specific situation, you chose a specific behavior. And the behavior, repeated enough times, was delegated to the unconscious, where it became automatic, running on its own, without conscious direction. The way driving becomes automatic after enough practice. The problem is that the behavior was installed for a context that may no longer exist, and the automatic, which was appropriate then, may be inappropriate now. But the automaticity does not update itself. It runs the old program in the new context, producing the old response in the new situation. Think of a response you cannot seem to stop, the reaction that fires before you can choose. And consider that the firing is the unconscious running a program that was installed by your past and has never been updated for your present. You do not need to update any program tonight. Let the automatic rest, and know that the responses you cannot stop are not failures of willpower, but successes of installation, the unconscious faithfully running what was once deliberately placed there. The script you follow without knowing. The script you follow without knowing is the unconscious narrative that structures your life, the story your psyche is telling through your choices, your relationships, and your patterns, a story you did not write but are faithfully performing. The script was composed from your earliest experiences, the lessons your childhood taught about what love looks like, what danger looks like, what success looks like, and the lessons, absorbed before they could be evaluated, became the plot from which your adult life is staged. The script determines your role: the hero, the victim, the rescuer, the outsider. The role was not chosen. It was assigned by the script, and the script, running in the unconscious, produces the life that fits the role without the person ever knowing they are performing. Think of the role you play in your life and how consistently you play it, how every new situation seems to cast you in the same part, and how the consistency, which looks like identity, is actually the script running its program. You do not need to rewrite any script tonight. Let the performance rest, and know that the life you are living is partly a conscious creation and partly an unconscious production. And the production, once you see the script, can be revised by a consciousness that has finally read what the unconscious was writing. The attraction. The attraction the unconscious chose is the pull towards specific people, situations, and experiences that the conscious mind did not select and often cannot explain. The gravitational force that draws you toward particular persons with a specificity that rational preference cannot account for. The unconscious chooses your attractions based on its own criteria, which are not the same as the ego's, selecting not for compatibility, but for wholeness, pulling you toward the people who carry the projected qualities you have not yet developed in yourself, and toward the situations that will activate the growth the unconscious needs you to undergo. The attraction is not random. It is deeply purposeful, guided by an intelligence that sees further into your developmental needs than your conscious mind can, and that selects, with startling precision, the person or the situation that will challenge you in exactly the way you need to be challenged. Think of the attraction that surprised you, that did not fit your type, that defied your rational criteria, and how the defying was the unconscious selecting for growth rather than comfort. You do not need to analyze any attraction tonight. Let the pull rest, chosen and purposeful, and know that the people you are drawn to were selected by a mind that knows what you need better than you do. The avoidance that runs itself. The avoidance that runs itself is the automatic steering away from topics, situations, feelings, and people that threaten to activate unconscious material the ego is not ready to face. The avoidance is not conscious. You do not decide to avoid. You simply find yourself steering away, changing the subject, leaving the room, losing interest, feeling suddenly tired, each deflection so smooth and so natural that it feels like preference rather than defense. The unconscious protects the ego by arranging the avoidance before the ego is aware there is something to avoid. And the arrangement, because it is unconscious, feels like free choice. You think you chose not to go to that event. You think you chose to change the subject. You think you simply lost interest. But the choosing was done below, by a system that detected the approaching content and redirected you before the content could arrive. Think of the things you avoid and how effortless the avoiding feels, and how the effortlessness is the sign that the avoidance is automated. You do not need to face any avoidance tonight. Let the deflections rest, and know that the things you avoid most effortlessly are often the things the unconscious most needs to protect you from. And the protection, while it keeps you safe, also keeps you from the very growth the avoided material was offering. The sabotage that comes from inside. The sabotage that comes from inside is the unconscious undermining the conscious mind's plans, the inexplicable failure, the forgotten appointment, the mistake made at the crucial moment, the success that was within reach and was dropped by a hand that seem to act on its own. The sabotage is not clumsiness. It is the unconscious disagreeing with the ego's agenda and expressing the disagreement through action, producing the failure the ego did not intend because the failure serves the unconscious's purpose. The unconscious may be protecting you from a success that threatens the self-concept. It may be redirecting you away from a goal that serves the ego, but not the self. It may be expressing a desire for a different path through the destruction of the current one. The sabotage is a communication, delivered through behavior because the verbal channel is closed, and the communication, however frustrating, is always purposeful. Think of a time you sabotaged yourself, and how mysterious the sabotaging was, and how the mystery dissolves when you consider that another part of your mind, with different priorities, was acting through your hands. You do not need to prevent any sabotage tonight. Let the undermining rest, and know that the unconscious does not sabotage randomly. It sabotages purposefully, and the purpose, once understood, often reveals that the failure was more aligned with your true needs than the success it prevented. The defense that operates on its own. The defense that operates on its own is the ego's automatic protection system, the set of mechanisms, denial, projection, rationalization, intellectualization, that activate without conscious decision whenever unconscious material threatens to break through to awareness. The defenses are not chosen. They are deployed automatically. The psyche's immune system responding to the approach of threatening material the way the body's immune system responds to the approach of infection. You do not decide to deny. The denial operates. You do not decide to project. The projection fires. You do not decide to rationalize. The rationalization constructs itself. Each defense is a specific response to a specific type of threat, and the specificity, while invisible to the person using it, is recognizable to anyone observing from outside. Think of your most automatic defense, the one you do not know you are doing until someone points it out, and how the pointing out itself activates the defense again, the system defending against the exposure of the defense. You do not need to lower any defense tonight. Let the system rest, protecting as it always does, and know that the defenses, while they keep you safe from the unconscious's content, also keep you safe from the unconscious's gifts, and the same wall that blocks the threatening also blocks the transformative. The habit that serves the unconscious. The habit that serves the unconscious is the behavior you repeat daily that appears to be a conscious choice, but that is actually maintained by an unconscious need. The habit that resists all attempts to break it, because the breaking would remove something the unconscious requires. The snacking that serves not hunger but anxiety. The scrolling that serves not boredom but avoidance. The overworking that serves not ambition but the fear of being still. Each habit is a surface behavior maintained by a depth the conscious mind cannot see, and the attempts to break the habit fail, because the attempts address the surface, while the depth remains untouched. The habit is not the problem. The unconscious need it serves is the problem, and the habit, until the need is addressed, will continue to find ways to express itself, through this habit or through a replacement. Think of the habit you cannot break, and what it might be serving. What the unconscious gets from the behavior that the conscious mind does not know it needs. You do not need to break any habit tonight. Let the repetition rest, and know that the habit that resists breaking is the habit that is doing the most work for the unconscious, and the work, once understood, reveals not a weakness in your willpower, but a need in your depths. The pattern in every relationship. The pattern in every relationship is the unconscious's most visible program, the recurring dynamic that appears in every significant bond you form, regardless of the partner. The specific quality of closeness and distance, the specific role you play, the specific way the relationship develops, and the specific way it ends. Each one a repetition of a template installed in the unconscious long before any of the partners arrived. The template is the original relationship pattern learned in childhood, and the pattern, because it is unconscious, does not update with experience. It runs the same program with every new partner, producing the same dynamic, the same conflicts, the same roles, the same ending. The partners change. The pattern does not. And the not changing, which the person experiences as bad luck or bad choices, is actually the faithful execution of an unconscious program that does not distinguish between partners because the partners were never the variable. The pattern was. Think of the pattern that runs through your relationships and how it persists despite every effort to choose differently. You do not need to change any pattern tonight. Let the program rest, And know that the pattern will change, not when you choose a different partner, but when the unconscious template that is producing the pattern is finally brought into consciousness and revised. The program that was installed early. The program that was installed early is the whole of this tier in miniature, the recognition that the patterns, complexes, defenses, reactions, and automatic behaviors that run your life were installed in the unconscious during childhood, when the psyche was most absorbent and least able to filter what it absorbed, and that the installation, done before you could evaluate it, runs now with an authority that your adult intelligence cannot easily override. The program is not your choice. It is your inheritance, the psychological software installed by your earliest environment. And the software, because it was installed before you had the capacity to question it, operates with the unquestioned authority of the obvious. This is just how things are, that prevents examination by making examination seem unnecessary. Think of how many of your automatic responses were learned so early you cannot remember learning them, and how the not remembering makes them feel like nature rather than nurture. You do not need to uninstall any program tonight. Let the early rest, installed and running, and know that the programs are not permanent. They are persistent. And the persistence, while formidable, is not invulnerable to the consciousness that has finally decided to examine what it has been running without question. The life, the unconscious, is living for you. The life the unconscious is living for you is the whole of this tier gathered into a single, humbling recognition that a significant portion of your daily life, your choices, your reactions, your relationships, your habits, and your avoidances is being lived not by you, but by the unconscious, running its programs, executing its patterns, deploying its defenses, and producing its repetitions, all while you, the conscious mind, believe you are the one in charge. The life you think you are choosing is partly chosen and partly produced, the conscious and the unconscious collaborating on a production in which the conscious mind believes it is the director, and is actually, in many scenes, the audience. The recognition is humbling but also liberating, because a life that is being lived by the unconscious is a life that can be reclaimed, one pattern at a time, one awareness at a time, each recognition of an automatic program being the first step toward replacing the automatic with the deliberate. Think of how much of today was lived by you and how much was lived by the programs, and how the distinction, once you start looking for it, becomes both clearer and more disturbing. You do not need to reclaim anything tonight. Let the unconscious run, as it always runs, and know that the life it is living for you can, with patience and attention, become the life you are living for yourself. Your unconscious chose your partner. Your unconscious chose your partner. And the choosing happened before your conscious mind had finished evaluating the options. The unconscious selecting based on criteria the ego does not know it has. Criteria formed by your earliest attachment experiences, your shadow contents, your anima or animus image, and the specific configuration of wounds and potentials that your unconscious recognizes, instantly and without explanation, in the person who will activate the growth you most need. The conscious mind believes it chose. It remembers evaluating qualities, weighing compatibility, making a rational assessment. But the assessment happened after the selection, the conscious mind justifying a choice the unconscious had already made, producing reasons for a decision that was driven by forces the reasoning mind cannot access. The partner you chose is the partner your unconscious needed. And the needing is not about happiness, but about wholeness, which is why the unconscious often selects partners who challenge you rather than partners who comfort you, because the challenge is where the growth is. Think of your partner and how the choosing felt, the speed, the certainty, the sense that the decision was already made before you finished thinking about it, and how the sense was accurate because the decision was made in the unconscious, possibly at first sight. You do not need to question any choice tonight. Let the selection rest, unconscious and purposeful, and know that the partner your unconscious chose was chosen not for who they are to your ego, but for what they activate in your depths. The image you projected onto them. The image you projected onto them is the anima or animus, the inner image of the ideal beloved that was assembled in your unconscious from your earliest experiences of love, from cultural ideals, from archetypal material, and from the specific, personal, unrepeatable configuration of your longings. And that was placed, fully formed, onto the real person who happened to match it closely enough to receive the projection. The projection is what made the person glow. What made them seem more significant than any ordinary human being? What produced the overwhelming feeling that this person was special, was different, was the one? The specialness was real as an experience and false as a perception, because the specialness belonged to the image, not to the person. And the person, carrying the image without knowing it, appeared to be something they were not. The relationship that follows a strong projection is a relationship with the image first and the person second. And the drama of the relationship is the slow, often painful process of the image dissolving and the real person being discovered underneath. Think of the glow your partner carried, and how the glow faded and the person appeared, and how the appearing, which felt like disappointment, was actually the beginning of the real relationship. You do not need to project anything tonight. Let the image rest, projected and returning, and know that the glow you saw was yours, placed on them by your unconscious. And the returning of the glow is not a loss, but a homecoming. The quality you love is your own. The quality you love in your partner is your own, living in your unconscious projected outward because you have not yet developed it in yourself. And the loving of it in them is the unconscious's way of showing you what you most need to develop. The man who falls in love with a woman's emotional depth is seeing his own undeveloped feeling function. The woman who falls in love with a man's quiet strength is seeing her own undeveloped assertiveness. The quality is not theirs alone. It is yours, reflected in them. And the reflection, which feels like admiration, is actually a longing for a part of yourself you have not yet claimed. Jung saw this as one of the primary functions of romantic love, the unconscious using the partner as a mirror for the unlived qualities, drawing the person toward the partner who carries the projection and, through the relationship, eventually forcing the development of the quality in the person who projected it. Think of the quality you most love in your partner and ask whether it exists in you, undeveloped, waiting, and whether the love you feel for it in them is the unconscious's way of saying, "This is yours. Claim it." You do not need to claim anything tonight. Let the quality rest, projected and admired, and know that the thing you love most in another person is often the thing you most need to find in yourself. The fight is with yourself, not them, and this is one of Jung's most uncomfortable truths about conflict in relationships, that the most heated arguments, the most intense emotional reactions, the most persistent frustrations with your partner are often not about the partner at all, but about the parts of yourself that the partner is reflecting back to you through the mechanism of projection. You are not fighting their stubbornness. You are fighting your own, seen in them, unbearable because it is unacknowledged. You are not fighting their neediness. You are fighting yours, projected onto them, intolerable because it is denied. The fight with the partner is the unconscious staging an internal conflict through an external relationship, using the partner as a stand-in for the part of yourself you cannot face directly. Think of your most persistent conflict with your partner and ask what part of yourself the conflict might be about, what quality you are fighting in them that you are refusing to see in yourself. You do not need to resolve any fight tonight. Let the conflict rest, external and internal, and know that the fight that keeps returning is the unconscious's most persistent message, delivered through the relationship because the relationship is the only mirror the unconscious has that is close enough and honest enough to show you what you need to see. Your parent lives in your partner. Your parent lives in your partner, and this is the unconscious's most reliable trick in partner selection. The matching of the new partner to the template set by the first people who loved you, so that the emotional dynamic of the adult relationship mirrors the emotional dynamic of the childhood one with a precision that is entirely unconscious and entirely undeniable once you see it. The partner is not your parent, but the emotional atmosphere of the bond, the specific quality of closeness and distance, the particular way you feel loved or not loved, the specific dynamic of who pursues and who withdraws, mirrors the parental relationship with an accuracy that the conscious mind, which believes it chose freely, finds difficult to accept. The unconscious selected the partner not for who they are but for how they feel. And the feeling, because it matches the original template, feels like home, which is why the most dysfunctional relationships often feel the most familiar. Think of the emotional atmosphere of your relationship and compare it to the emotional atmosphere of your childhood, and notice the similarity. You do not need to analyze any relationship tonight. Let the parent rest, living quietly in the partner, and know that the matching was done by the unconscious. And the unconscious, which does not seek happiness but seeks completion, brought you to the person whose emotional frequency matches the frequency you were tuned to as a child. The wound that selected the match. The wound that selected the match is the unconscious's deepest criterion for partner selection, the matching of your wound to their wound, your injury to their injury, so that the two wounds interlock, each one activating the other, each one providing the exact trigger the other needs, and the interlocking, producing a relationship that is simultaneously the most painful and the most potentially healing bond either person could form. The unconscious does not select for comfort. It selects for activation, choosing the partner whose wound will press on yours and whose wound yours will press on, creating a system in which both injuries are exposed simultaneously and both opportunities for healing are present simultaneously. The pain of the activation is the unconscious's investment in your growth, the discomfort of the wound being touched being the price of the wound being reached. Think of how precisely your partner's wound activates yours, and how the precision is not cruelty but accuracy. The unconscious matching the wounds with a specificity that no conscious selection process could match. You do not need to examine any wound tonight. Let the matching rest, precise and purposeful, and know that the wound that selected the match was not trying to hurt you. It was trying to heal you, and the healing, which requires the activation, is the reason the unconscious chose this particular person. The unconscious contract you signed. The unconscious contract you signed is the unspoken agreement between two unconscious minds that defines the real terms of the relationship. The terms that are never discussed because they are never conscious, but that govern the bond more completely than any spoken agreement ever could. The contract specifies who will carry which projection, who will play which role, who will be the strong one and who the needy one, who will pursue and who will withdraw. And the specifying, done entirely below awareness, produces a relationship with a structure the conscious minds of both partners did not create and often do not recognize. The contract is binding not by law, but by unconscious need, each partner fulfilling their role because the role serves their unconscious purpose. And the purpose, though hidden, drives the behavior more powerfully than any conscious intention. Think of the roles in your relationship and how naturally they were assumed, and how the naturalness was the unconscious contract being enacted. You do not need to renegotiate any contract tonight. Let the agreement rest, unsigned and binding, and know that the dynamics you could never understand in your relationship may have been the terms of a contract you signed in the dark, with a mind you have never met, for reasons you have never been told. They mirror what you cannot see. They mirror what you cannot see. And this is the partner's most valuable function in Jung's understanding of relationships, the role of being the surface on which your unconscious contents appear, the mirror that shows you the parts of yourself you have not yet met, through the mechanism of projection, through the triggering of complexes, and through the simple, daily closeness that makes hiding impossible. The partner does not choose to mirror. They simply exist, close enough for the mirror to work, and the working shows you not the partner, but yourself, reflected more clearly than any solitary introspection could achieve. The things that annoy you are your shadow. The things that fascinate you are your unlived potential. The things that frighten you are your unprocessed wounds. Each one is visible in the partner, because the partner is the nearest, clearest, most intimate mirror available. Think of what your partner shows you about yourself, and how the showing, though it often feels like their behavior, is actually your unconscious using their presence as a screen. You do not need to look in any mirror tonight. Let the reflection rest, and know that the person beside you, or the person in your memory, was never just a partner. They were the unconscious's most effective tool for showing you to yourself. The role you assigned without knowing. The role you assigned without knowing is the character you cast your partner as in the unconscious drama of your inner life. The hero, the villain, the rescuer, the child, the parent, the authority, assigned not by their qualities but by your needs, your projections, and the specific configuration of your unconscious theater. The partner does not choose the role. You assign it, unconsciously, and the assigning, because it is unconscious, feels like perception rather than projection. You are not casting, you are seeing, and the seeing, which feels like an honest assessment of who they are, is actually the unconscious handing them a costume and a script and asking them to play a part that your inner drama requires. Think of the role your partner plays in your life and how consistently they play it, and consider that the consistency may be the casting rather than the character. You do not need to recast anyone tonight. Let the roles rest, assigned and performing, and know that the partner who plays the same role in every scene is playing the role your unconscious wrote, and the writing, once you see it, can be revised by a consciousness that has finally noticed it is the playwright. The unconscious power dynamic. The unconscious power dynamic is the invisible hierarchy that structures every intimate relationship, the unspoken arrangement of who holds the power, who defers, who leads, who follows, who sets the emotional temperature, and who adjusts to it. All of it negotiated not in conversation but in the unconscious, where the arrangement was settled before either partner knew there was a negotiation. The power dynamic is produced by the interlocking of two unconscious systems, each one bringing its own patterns of dominance and submission, learned in childhood. And the interlocking, which happens automatically, produces a specific power arrangement that the conscious minds of both partners then rationalize as natural, as just how we are, when it is actually the product of two sets of unconscious programming, finding their compatible positions. Think of the power dynamic in your relationship and how it was established, not through discussion but through the gradual, unspoken settling of two unconscious systems into their default arrangement. You do not need to adjust any dynamic tonight. Let the power rest, arranged and unconscious, and know that the dynamic that feels natural is the dynamic the unconscious installed, and the naturalness is the programming, not the truth. The intimacy that scares the ego. The intimacy that scares the ego is the closeness that threatens the ego's boundaries, the exposure that the ego spends its life preventing, the vulnerability that genuine intimacy requires, and that the ego, whose primary function is self-protection, resists with everything it has. The unconscious wants intimacy because intimacy is the condition for wholeness, for the meeting of the inner with the outer, for the projection to be withdrawn, and the real person to be seen. The ego resists intimacy because intimacy means being seen, and being seen means the persona, the mask, the constructed surface, is no longer sufficient, and the self behind the mask, with all its imperfections, is exposed. The tension between the unconscious drive toward intimacy and the ego's resistance to it is one of the central dramas of every relationship, producing the approaching and withdrawing, the opening and closing, the wanting and fearing that characterize the most important bonds. Think of how much you want to be truly known and how much you fear it. You do not need to open anything tonight. Let the ego rest, protective and frightened, and know that the intimacy it fears is the intimacy the unconscious needs, and the needing, though it terrifies the ego, is always in service of a wholeness the ego cannot achieve alone. The relationship as unconscious dialogue. The relationship as unconscious dialogue is the recognition that every intimate relationship is, beneath the surface conversation, a conversation between two unconscious minds, each one using the partner to express what it cannot express directly, each one projecting, triggering, activating, and mirroring the other's contents in a continuous, wordless exchange that the conscious minds of both partners experience as the relationship. But that is, in truth, the unconscious minds of both partners, talking to each other through the medium of two bodies, two voices, and two lives. The relationship is the dialogue. The partners are the voices. And the dialogue, because it is unconscious, says things the partners would never say and knows things the partners have never known, producing moments of extraordinary connection and extraordinary conflict that both partners feel, but neither fully understands. Think of the moments in your relationship that felt like more than two people talking, the moments that carried an intensity or a significance that the words alone could not account for, and know that the more was the unconscious dialogue, the two depths speaking to each other through the two surfaces. You do not need to translate any dialogue tonight. Let the conversation rest, unconscious and ongoing, and know that the relationship you have with another person is always, simultaneously, a relationship between two unconscious minds, and the depth of the relationship is measured not by what the surfaces say, but by what the depths are silently, continuously. Every bond is an unconscious meeting. Every bond is an unconscious meeting. And this is the whole of this tier gathered into a single recognition that every significant relationship in your life, every love, every friendship, every enmity, every bond that carries emotional weight, is a meeting arranged by the unconscious, for the unconscious, in service of the unconscious's goal, which is your wholeness. The unconscious brings you to the people who will show you yourself, who will activate your wounds, who will carry your projections, who will trigger your complexes, and who will provide, through the friction and the mirroring and the triggering, the conditions for the growth. The conscious mind would never choose, but that the unconscious knows you need. Think of every significant bond in your life as an unconscious meeting, arranged by a part of you that sees further than you can see, and know that the meetings, even the painful ones, were never random. They were selected by a mind that knows what you need, for reasons that only the growth they produce can explain. You do not need to meet anyone tonight. Let the bonds rest, unconscious and meaningful, and know that the people in your life are the unconscious's messengers, each one carrying a piece of the puzzle of who you are, delivered through the only medium the unconscious has, which is the human relationship. The wall. The ego built against itself. The wall the ego built against itself is the fundamental dynamic between the conscious and the unconscious, the ego constructing a barrier against the very parts of itself it cannot tolerate, creating a division within the psyche that produces the suffering the division was designed to prevent. The wall is made of defenses, of denial, of repression, of the sustained effort to keep the unconscious contents below the threshold, and the effort, which never stops, is one of the most energy-expensive operations the psyche performs. The wall is not protection against an external enemy. It is protection against an internal truth, the truth of who you are beneath the ego's edited version. And the truth, held behind the wall, pushes against it with a persistence that the ego's maintenance can delay but never permanently prevent. Jung saw this wall as the primary source of neurotic suffering, the energy spent maintaining the division draining the resources the person needs for living, and the draining, producing an exhaustion that no rest can address because the work never stops. Think of the energy you spend keeping certain parts of yourself out of awareness, and how the spending feels normal, because it has always been there. The quiet, constant, invisible cost of the wall, the ego built between itself and everything it cannot face. You do not need to lower any wall tonight. Let the defenses rest, as they sometimes do in sleep, and know that the wall, while it has kept you functional, has also kept you divided. And the dividing, sustained over years, is the architecture of the suffering the wall was built to prevent. The defense you do not know you use. The defense you do not know you use is the ego's most effective mechanism precisely because it is invisible to the person using it. The denial so automatic it does not register as denial. The projection so habitual it does not register as projection. The rationalization so smooth it does not register as anything but honest thinking. The invisible defense is the most powerful defense because it operates without announcing itself, protecting the ego. Without the ego knowing it is being protected, and the not knowing ensures that the defense is never questioned, never examined, and never voluntarily lowered. You cannot lower a defense you do not know you have, and the not knowing is the defense's greatest strength. Other people can see your defenses. They can see the denial you do not see. They can see the projection you do not see. But you, from the inside, see only clear thinking, honest perception, and reasonable responses, because the defenses present themselves as exactly these things. Think of the feedback you have received from others about your behavior, the observations that surprised you, and consider that the surprise was the defense being pointed at from the outside by someone who could see what you could not. You do not need to identify any defense tonight. Let the invisible rest, operating and unseen, and know that the most important defenses in your psyche are the ones you will be the last to discover. The resistance that proves the truth. The resistance that proves the truth is Jung's counterintuitive observation that the strength of your resistance to a psychological truth is proportional to the truth's importance, that the things you most vigorously deny are the things the unconscious most needs you to see, and the vigor of the denial is the measure of the content's relevance, not its wrongness. The resistance is the ego defending its territory against an invading truth, and the stronger the truth, the stronger the defense, producing the paradox that the thing you resist most is the thing you most need, and the needing produces the resisting, and the resisting produces the escalation. Jung saw this in therapy constantly. Patients resisting most fiercely the insights that were closest to their core wound, the insights that would have produced the most healing if they had been accepted instead of fought. Think of a truth about yourself that you resist, and consider that the resistance is the unconscious's endorsement, the strength of the fight telling you how close you are to something real. You do not need to accept any truth tonight. Let the resistance rest, fighting and signaling, and know that the things you resist most fiercely are the things that would change you most deeply. And the fierceness, far from disproving the truth, is the surest sign that the truth has touched something real. The fear of your own depth. The fear of your own depth is the ego's most honest emotion, the genuine terror of what might be found if the unconscious were fully explored, the shadow, the wounds, the desires, the power, the vastness that the ego, small and managing, senses below and is afraid to approach. The fear is rational. The depth is real. The contents of the unconscious include things the ego does not want to know. Truths about yourself that threaten the comfortable self-image. Potentials that threaten the manageable life. Energies that threaten the controlled personality. The fear keeps the exploration from happening, and the not happening keeps the person living on the surface, functional and shallow, managing a life that never reaches the depth where the real living is done. Jung saw the fear of depth as one of the most common and most tragic limitations, the person sensing the ocean beneath them and choosing, out of fear, to stay on the small, bright island, never knowing what the ocean contains. Think of what you are afraid to find in yourself, and how the fear prevents the finding, and how the prevention keeps you from the very thing the finding would reveal, which might be not the monster you fear, but the depth you need. You do not need to explore any depth tonight. Let the fear rest, and know that the depth you fear is the depth that contains not only your darkness but your gold, and the gold, which is mixed with the dark, can only be found by someone willing to enter the place the fear is guarding. The numbness that replaced the feeling. The numbness that replaced the feeling is the ego's last resort defense, the shutdown that occurs when the unconscious material pushing upward is too strong for the normal defenses to contain, and the psyche, unable to process and unable to defend, turns the volume down on everything, producing not pain and not relief, but nothing. The specific, recognizable flatness of a person who has been overwhelmed into silence. The numbness is not peace. It is a cessation, the system going offline because the demand exceeded the capacity, and the offline, while it prevents the overwhelming, also prevents the living, cutting the person off from their own emotional life in order to protect them from the part of it they cannot handle. Think of a period when everything went flat, when you stopped feeling, when the world continued around you without reaching you, and how the flatness was not apathy but protection, the psyche shutting down because staying open would have been too costly. You do not need to feel anything tonight. Let the numbness rest if it is there, or let the feelings flow if they are coming, and know that the shutdown, when it happened, was not your failure, but your psyche's most desperate form of self-preservation, the turning off of the system so that the system would survive. The persona that covers the real. The persona that covers the real is the social mask Jung described as the ego's outermost layer, the constructed face you present to the world, the version of yourself that was built to be acceptable, successful, likable, and safe, and that covers, with varying degrees of thoroughness, the real person underneath. The persona is not a lie. It is an adaptation, a necessary interface between the individual and the social world, and without it, social functioning would be impossible. But the persona becomes a trap when it is mistaken for the real self, when the mask is worn so long and so completely that the person wearing it forgets they are wearing it, and the forgetting produces a specific kind of suffering. The suffering of a person who is performing a role they do not remember choosing, and who has lost access to the person the role was designed to protect. Think of the face you show the world, and how much of it is constructed, and how much of the real you lives behind it, unseen and possibly forgotten. You do not need to remove any mask tonight. Let the persona rest, and know that the mask, while necessary, is not you, and the real self, behind it, has been waiting, patiently, for the safety to be shown. The control that prevents the healing. The control that prevents the healing is the ego's paradoxical response to unconscious material. The attempt to manage the very thing that needs to be released, to control the very process that requires surrender. The ego approaches the unconscious the way it approaches everything, with management, with strategy, with the attempt to direct and contain, And the approach which works in the outer world fails completely in the inner one, because the unconscious cannot be managed. It can only be met, and the meeting requires the ego to do the one thing it is least equipped to do, which is to let go of control and trust, a process it cannot direct. The control prevents the healing because the healing requires the ego to open the very gates the control has been keeping closed, to allow the unconscious material to surface without managing it, to feel without editing, to experience without directing. Think of how much you try to control your inner process, and how the controlling has prevented the very changes it was trying to produce. You do not need to control anything tonight. Let the managing rest, and know that the healing the unconscious offers is available only to the ego that is willing to stop managing long enough to receive it. The comfort zone. The unconscious guards. The comfort zone the unconscious guards is the familiar psychological territory the ego occupies, the known emotional range, the predictable relational patterns, the safe, familiar, well-defended space within which the ego feels secure, and that the unconscious's defenses are designed to maintain. The comfort zone is not comfortable because it is good. It is comfortable because it is known. And the known, in the ego's accounting, is always safer than the unknown, even when the known is painful and the unknown holds the possibility of relief. The unconscious guards the comfort zone by deploying the defenses whenever the person approaches the boundary, generating anxiety when growth threatens, producing resistance when change approaches, creating symptoms when the familiar is about to be left. The guarding is not in your interest. It is in the ego's interest, which is stability, and the stability, while it feels like safety, is the very thing preventing the expansion that the deeper self requires. Think of how much of your life is spent inside the comfort zone, and how the staying feels like a choice when it is actually the defenses doing their work. You do not need to leave any comfort zone tonight. Let the familiar rest, and know that the growth you most need is almost always outside the boundary the unconscious is guarding, and the guarding, while it feels protective, is the wall between you and the life your depth is calling you to live. The intelligence you refuse to trust. The intelligence you refuse to trust is the unconscious itself, the vast, purposeful, sophisticated system that has been sending you guidance your entire life through dreams, intuitions, feelings, and synchronicities, and that you have, for the most part, ignored, dismissed, or explained away, because the ego, which trusts only what it can control, cannot control the unconscious and therefore does not trust it. The refusal to trust is understandable. The unconscious speaks a language the ego does not understand. Its communications are symbolic, indirect, often confusing. Its timing does not match the ego's schedule. Its priorities do not match the ego's agenda. But the intelligence, for all its unfamiliarity, is the only part of the psyche that has access to the full picture, the only mind in the system that can see both the surface and the depth. And the seeing, if trusted, produces a guidance that the ego's limited perspective could never match. Think of the intuitions you ignored and the dreams you dismissed, and how the ignoring cost you, because the unconscious, which was trying to help, was refused by the very person it was trying to help. You do not need to trust any intelligence tonight. Let the unconscious rest, refused and patient, and know that the guidance you have been refusing is the most comprehensive guidance available to you, produced by a mind that sees everything and asks only to be heard. The growth the ego cannot allow. The growth the ego cannot allow is the development that would require the ego to change its shape, to expand beyond its current boundaries, to include the parts of the psyche it has excluded, and the expansion, because it threatens the ego's current identity, is resisted as though it were a threat rather than an opportunity. The ego defines itself by what it includes and what it excludes. And the growth, which would change the inclusions and the exclusions, threatens the definition, which is the ego's most fundamental possession. A person who is defined by their strength cannot allow the weakness. A person defined by their independence cannot allow the need. A person defined by their goodness cannot allow the shadow. Each definition is a boundary, and the growth that would cross the boundary is experienced by the ego as annihilation rather than expansion. Think of the growth you most resist and what the resistance is protecting. What definition of yourself the growth would change. You do not need to grow tonight. Let the ego rest, defined and defended, and know that the growth you most resist is the growth you most need. And the ego's resistance fierce and frightened, is the measure of how much the growth would transform you. The breakdown that opens the gate. The breakdown that opens the gate is the ego's involuntary collapse, the moment when the defenses fail and the unconscious material, held back for years, floods through the broken gate into awareness. The breakdown is terrifying because the ego is losing its most fundamental capacity, control, and the losing feels like dying, like the end of the self, like the dissolution of everything that was held together by the effort that has now failed. But the gate that opens in the breakdown is the gate to the unconscious, and the opening, while it is experienced as catastrophe by the ego, is experienced as opportunity by the self, because the gate has been closed for too long and the material behind it has been building pressure that the ego's defenses could not indefinitely contain. The breakdown is not the end. It is the beginning of a forced dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, a dialogue the ego would never have chosen and that the unconscious has been trying to initiate for years. Think of a breakdown, yours or someone else's, and how the breaking, while it destroyed the structure, also opened a passage to a depth the structure was preventing. You do not need to break down tonight. Let the gate rest, closed or open, and know that the breakdown is the unconscious's last resort, the forced opening of a gate the ego would not open voluntarily, and the opening, terrifying and transformative, is the beginning of the most important conversation your psyche can have. The surrender. The ego fears most. The surrender the ego fears most is the letting go of control, the admission that the ego is not the whole of the psyche and that the unconscious, vast and intelligent, has a wisdom the ego does not possess and a perspective the ego cannot achieve. The surrender is not defeat. It is collaboration, the ego's willingness to stop fighting the unconscious and start listening, to stop managing and start receiving, to stop building walls and start opening gates. But the surrender feels like defeat, because the ego, which has spent its entire existence maintaining control, experiences the relinquishing of control as a death, and the feeling of death, however inaccurate, is so powerful that most people choose the exhaustion of fighting over the terror of surrendering. Think of how much energy you spend maintaining control over your inner life, and how the controlling has prevented the very integration the unconscious has been offering. You do not need to surrender anything tonight, but you are, in a sense, already surrendering, here in the dark, in the drowsy state where the ego naturally loosens its grip and the unconscious naturally rises. And the rising, which happens every night, is the rehearsal for the larger surrender the psyche eventually requires. The protection that must be outgrown. The protection that must be outgrown is the whole of this tier, the recognition that the defenses, the walls, the resistance, the control, the persona, the comfort zone, all of them served a purpose. All of them were built for good reasons, and all of them, having served their purpose, must eventually be outgrown, because the protection that was necessary in childhood is restrictive in adulthood, and the restrictive, maintained past its usefulness, becomes the cage that the previous tier described. The outgrowing is not a destruction, it is a development. The person becoming large enough that the protection is no longer needed, strong enough that the walls can be lowered, whole enough that the defenses can stand down. The outgrowing happens naturally, through the process Jung called individuation, the lifelong development of the personality toward its fullest expression, and the development, which requires the gradual opening of the gates, the gradual lowering of the walls, and the gradual integration of the unconscious, is the most important work a person can do. Think of the protections you have outgrown, and how the outgrowing felt like a loss, and was actually a freedom. You do not need to outgrow anything tonight. Let the protection rest, useful and limiting, and know that the defenses that saved you can, when you are ready, be gently, gratefully set down. And the setting down reveals not the vulnerability the ego feared, but the strength the defenses were hiding. The unconscious is not your enemy. The unconscious is not your enemy, and this is the most important shift in perspective this video offers. The move from seeing the unconscious as a dangerous, chaotic basement full of things that threaten the ego, to seeing it as a vast, intelligent, purposeful system that has been working for your wholeness since the day you were born. The unconscious is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to complete you. And the completing, because it requires the inclusion of parts the ego has rejected, often looks like disruption from the ego's perspective. The dreams disturbing, the moods inexplicable, the symptoms uncomfortable. Each one a communication from an intelligence that is trying to help, received by an ego that interprets the help as a threat. The reframing is everything. The person who sees the unconscious as an enemy fights it, producing the exhaustion and the suffering of a lifelong war with themselves. The person who sees the unconscious as an ally listens to it, producing a collaboration that both reduces the suffering and accelerates the growth. Think of how you have related to your unconscious, whether you have fought it or listened to it, and how the fighting produced resistance, and the listening, when it happened, produced insight. You do not need to befriend any unconscious tonight. Let the relationship rest, shifting from war to peace, and know that the mind beneath your mind is the most powerful ally you have ever had, and the allying, which requires only the willingness to listen, changes everything. It has been guiding you all along. It has been guiding you all along, and the guidance, which was invisible because you were not looking for it, has been present in every dream you dismissed, every intuition you ignored, every synchronicity you explained away, every mood that arrived without cause and carried a meaning you did not investigate. The unconscious does not wait for your permission to guide. It guides continuously, sending its communications through every available channel, and the guidance, whether you receive it or not, is always directed toward the same destination, which is your wholeness, the fullest possible expression of who you are, the self that includes everything the ego has excluded. The guidance is not dramatic. It is quiet, persistent, patient, the steady pressure of a river moving toward the sea, adjustable in its route but unwavering in its direction. The unconscious does not force. It guides, and the guiding, because it is gentle, is easily missed, easily dismissed, easily overridden by the ego's louder, more urgent, but less wise agenda. Think of the times the guidance was there and you did not follow it, and how the not following produced the very difficulties the guidance was trying to prevent. You do not need to follow any guidance tonight. Let the direction rest, steady and present, and know that the unconscious has been navigating for you since before you knew there was a navigation. And the destination, which it has always known, is the version of yourself you have not yet met, but are always, slowly, becoming. The dream that showed you the way. The dream that showed you the way is the specific dream, the one you remember, the one that arrived at a turning point, that carried an image or a feeling so vivid and so precisely timed that the dream felt less like a random firing and more like a deliberate communication, a message from the depths arriving at the exact moment you needed to hear it. Jung called these big dreams, the dreams that come from the deepest layers of the unconscious and that carry a numinous quality, a sense of significance that ordinary dreams do not possess. The big dream is not about the day's residue. It is about the life's direction, the unconscious providing a vision, a symbol, a feeling that points toward the path the dreamer needs to take, and the pointing, because it comes from a mind with a wider perspective, is often more accurate than any conscious analysis. Think of a dream that changed something, that arrived at a difficult moment and provided something the waking mind could not, a clarity, a direction, a feeling of rightness that the day had not been able to produce. You do not need to dream any particular dream tonight. Let the dreams come as they will, and know that the unconscious, which has access to more of your life than you do, uses the dream as its most intimate, most direct, most personal form of guidance, a letter from the depths addressed to you alone. The crisis that was a redirection. The crisis that was a redirection is the unconscious's intervention in a life that has gone too far in the wrong direction, the breakdown, the loss, the failure, the collapse that seemed like catastrophe, and that was, in the unconscious's accounting, a correction, a forced return to the path the ego had abandoned. The unconscious does not prefer crisis. It prefers dreams, intuitions, gentle nudges. But when the gentle communications are ignored, the unconscious escalates, and the escalating produces the crisis, the forced redirection that the ego would never have chosen, and that the unconscious deployed, because every softer option had been exhausted. The crisis is not random. It is purposeful. The unconscious's last resort for a person who has been ignoring every gentler message, and the purpose, visible only in hindsight, is always the same. The return to the path the ego abandoned, the correction of a life that had gone too far in the wrong direction. Think of a crisis that redirected your life, and how the redirecting, which felt like destruction at the time, looks like correction now. You do not need to face any crisis tonight. Let the redirection rest, past, and purposeful, and know that the unconscious, when it cannot guide gently, guides forcefully. And the force, while it is experienced as catastrophe, is always in service of the wholeness the unconscious has been moving you toward all along. The self that sees the whole. The self that sees the whole is Jung's name for the totality of the psyche, the center that includes both the conscious and the unconscious, both the ego and the shadow, both the persona and the depth, the organizing intelligence that holds the entire system together and that guides the process of individuation from a perspective the ego cannot achieve because the ego is only a part and the self is the whole. The self is not the ego. The ego is the center of consciousness. The self is the center of the total psyche, and the total psyche, which includes the unconscious, is vastly larger than what the ego can see. The self sees the whole picture, the past and the future, the wounds and the potentials, the darkness and the gold, and the seeing, because it is comprehensive, produces a guidance that is wiser than anything the ego's partial view can generate. The self communicates through dreams, through synchronicities, through the quiet, persistent pull toward wholeness that you feel as longing, as direction, as the sense that you are meant for something you cannot yet see. Think of the pull, and know that the pulling is the self, the whole, guiding the part, the ego, toward the completeness the part cannot achieve alone. You do not need to find the self tonight. Let it rest, seeing and guiding, and know that the self has never stopped working for your wholeness. The individuation it is leading you to. The individuation it is leading you to is Jung's term for the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are. The gradual, often painful, always transformative journey from the ego's partial, defended, persona-wearing existence to the self's full, integrated, shadow-including wholeness. Individuation is not perfection. It is completion. The inclusion of everything that was excluded, the development of everything that was denied, the integration of the shadow, the reclaiming of the projections, the meeting of the unconscious, and the slow, patient building of a personality that includes the whole of what you are rather than the curated fraction the ego presents. The unconscious is not merely participating in individuation. It is driving it, providing the dreams, the crises, the symptoms, and the guidance that keep the process moving. Even when the ego, which prefers stability to growth, would rather the process stop. Think of the changes you have undergone and how the changing, though rarely chosen, has always moved you towards something more whole, more real, more complete. You do not need to individuate tonight. Let the process rest and know that the individuation has been underway since before you knew the word, guided by the unconscious, aimed at the wholeness, and moving, always moving, toward the version of yourself that includes the wholeness it has always wanted. The wholeness it has always wanted is the unconscious mind's single, unwavering goal, the integration of all the parts of the psyche into a unified, functioning whole, the shadow included, the persona relaxed, the ego and the unconscious in dialogue rather than in war, and the self, the totality, experienced as the center of a life that is fully lived rather than partially performed. The wholeness is not a state you achieve and maintain. It is a direction you travel in, a process rather than a destination. And the process, because it is lifelong, never produces a finished product, but always produces a more integrated one. The unconscious has wanted this wholeness from the beginning. Every dream was a step toward it. Every symptom was a protest against the deviation from it. Every crisis was a correction back toward it. The unconscious does not want you to be happy, though wholeness may include happiness. It does not want you to be successful, though wholeness may include success. It wants you to be whole, which means complete, which means including everything, which means the person who emerges from the process of individuation is not a better person but a fuller one. Think of what wholeness would feel like, and how different it is from perfection, and how the different is the point. You do not need to be whole tonight. Let the wholeness rest, approaching and unfinished, and know that the unconscious has been working toward it for your entire life. And the working, though you may not have known it was happening, has never stopped. The balance. It is always restoring. The balance it is always restoring is the unconscious mind's compensatory function, the automatic correction that occurs whenever the conscious life becomes too one-sided, too rigid, or too far from the center that the self occupies. When you are too rational, the unconscious sends irrational dreams. When you are too controlled, the unconscious produces impulses. When you are too extroverted, the unconscious pulls you inward. When you are too serious, the unconscious generates playfulness. The compensation is not opposition. It is balance, the unconscious providing what the conscious life is missing, and the providing, experienced by the ego as disruption, is actually correction, the system self-adjusting toward the equilibrium that the ego's one-sidedness has disturbed. Think of the ways your unconscious has compensated for your conscious one-sidedness, the dreams that challenged your certainty, the feelings that contradicted your position, the impulses that undermined your control, and how each one was the system restoring a balance the conscious mind had disturbed. You do not need to balance anything tonight. Let the compensation rest, and know that the unconscious is always at work, quietly, automatically, restoring the equilibrium that the conscious life, in its one-sidedness, is always disturbing. The meaning it offers in the dark. The meaning it offers in the dark is the unconscious's most generous gift, the sense of purpose, direction, and significance that arises not from the conscious mind's planning, but from the unconscious's deeper, wider, more comprehensive view of who you are and what your life is for. The meaning is not discovered through analysis. It is felt, arriving through the channels the unconscious uses, through dreams, through synchronicities, through the quiet, persistent pull that says, "This way, this direction, this is what matters," delivered not as a thought, but as a certainty, felt in the body, known in the bones, more real than any rationally constructed purpose. Jung saw meaning as the unconscious's greatest offering, the thing that makes suffering bearable, that makes effort worthwhile, that makes a life, even a difficult one, feel like it is going somewhere. And the going, directed by the unconscious's wider vision, is more accurate than any plan the ego could devise. Think of the moments when meaning arrived, uninvited and undeniable, and how the arriving felt like a gift from below, the unconscious offering something the surface could never produce on its own. You do not need to find any meaning tonight. Let the dark rest, and know that the meaning is in the dark, held by the unconscious, offered in the quiet, available to anyone who is willing to stop constructing meaning and start receiving it. The wisdom that comes only from below. The wisdom that comes only from below is the specific, irreplaceable knowledge that the unconscious mind holds, and that the conscious mind, for all its intelligence, cannot produce on its own. The wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the dream, the wisdom of the intuition, the wisdom of the archetype, each one a form of knowing that arises from the depth rather than from the surface, and that carries an authority the surface cannot match. The wisdom from below is older than rational thought. It is the accumulated intelligence of the species, stored in the collective unconscious, accessed through the individual unconscious, and delivered through the channels the unconscious uses, feeling, image, and symbol. The wisdom does not argue. It knows, and the knowing, when it arrives, carries a certainty that no amount of rational analysis can produce, because the certainty comes from a deeper source than reason can reach. Think of the wisest thing you have ever known, and ask whether you reasoned your way to it, or whether it arrived, from below, as a knowing that preceded and exceeded any reasoning. You do not need to seek any wisdom tonight. Let the knowing rest, arising from below, and know that the unconscious holds a wisdom the conscious mind can never independently produce. And the wisdom, available in every quiet moment, in every dream, in every intuition, is always being offered, patiently, by a mind that has been wiser than you for longer than you have been alive. The partnership you were never taught. The partnership you were never taught is the relationship between the conscious and the unconscious that Jung saw as the most important relationship in any person's life. More important than any external relationship, because it is the relationship between you and yourself, between the part you know and the part you do not, between the ego and the depths, and the quality of this relationship determines the quality of everything else. You were never taught this partnership because the culture does not recognize the unconscious as a partner. It recognizes the unconscious as a problem, a source of symptoms, a reservoir of repressed material, something to be managed rather than collaborated with. But Jung saw the partnership as the key to individuation, the collaboration between the ego and the unconscious, producing a life that neither could produce alone. The ego providing the direction and the unconscious providing the depth. The ego providing the doing and the unconscious providing the meaning. Think of how you relate to your own unconscious and whether the relating is a partnership or a war, and how different your life would be if the war became a dialogue. You do not need to start any partnership tonight. Let the relating rest, and know that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one between you and the mind beneath you. And the relationship, once it becomes a partnership, produces a life of a depth and a richness that no external relationship alone can match. The ally you have always had. The ally you have always had is the whole of this tier gathered into a single, warm recognition that the unconscious mind, which this entire video has been revealing, is not the threat the ego fears, but the ally the ego needs, the partner, the guide, the intelligence that has been working for your wholeness since before you were born. Through every dream, every symptom, every crisis, every mood, every intuition, every synchronicity, sending its messages with infinite patience to a conscious mind that has spent most of its life refusing to listen. The ally is still there. It has not given up. It will not give up. It will continue to send its messages, to guide, to compensate, to correct, to dream, to pull you toward the wholeness it has always wanted for you, regardless of whether you listen, regardless of whether you acknowledge it, regardless of whether you even know it exists. The ally does not require your gratitude. It requires only your attention, and the attention, when it is given, changes everything, because the unconscious, finally heard, can finally collaborate, and the collaboration produces a life the ego alone could never build. Think of the ally you have always had and never acknowledged, and how the acknowledging, which began tonight, is the beginning of the most important partnership of your life. You do not need to ally with anything tonight. Let the ally rest, patient and present, and know that the mind beneath your mind has been on your side all along. The mind that wakes when you sleep. The mind that wakes when you sleep is the unconscious entering its most active phase, the period during which the conscious mind, the gatekeeper, the censor, the manager, has stepped aside, and the unconscious, freed from oversight, takes full control of the psyche's creative and restorative processes. The waking you is not present. The defending you is not present. The controlling you is not present. And the absence of the controller is not a vulnerability but a liberation, because the unconscious, freed from the ego's interference, can do the work it has been trying to do all day, the processing, the integrating, the compensating, the communicating that the ego's defenses have been blocking. The unconscious does not sleep when you do. It awakens, and the awakening is its most productive period, the hours during which the dreams are composed, the memories are consolidated, the emotions are processed, and the psychological maintenance that keeps the psyche in balance is performed without the ego's supervision, in the specific, efficient, comprehensive way that only the unsupervised unconscious can manage. Think of what is about to happen as you fall asleep, the conscious mind releasing its grip and the unconscious mind taking over, and how the taking over, which happens every night, is the most natural and the most powerful handoff in your psychological life. You do not need to manage the handoff tonight. It manages itself, as it has managed itself every night of your life. The conscious mind letting go and the unconscious mind receiving. And the receiving, tonight, is about to begin. Let the waking rest, and let the mind that wakes when you sleep do the work it has been waiting all day to do. The dream is not what it seems. The dream is not what it seems. And this is the secret that transforms the way you relate to your dreams. The understanding that the dream's surface, the story, the characters, the setting, the sequence of events, is not the dream's meaning, but its costume. The symbolic clothing the unconscious uses to dress its message in a form the conscious mind can receive. The dream about the house is not about a house. It is about the self, the rooms being the parts of the psyche, the condition of the house being the condition of the self. And the meaning, once the symbol is understood, is richer and more specific than any literal interpretation could produce. The dream about the stranger is not about a stranger. It is about an unknown part of yourself, taking human form because the unconscious communicates through images, and the most natural image for a psychological quality is a person. Every dream is a symbol, and every symbol is a compressed, layered, multidimensional communication that carries more meaning than the surface story reveals, And the meaning, available to anyone willing to sit with the image rather than dismiss it, is the unconscious mind's most intimate, most personalized, most carefully crafted message. Think of the dreams you have dismissed as strange, as nonsense, as just a dream. And consider that the strangeness was the symbolism, and the symbolism was the meaning, and the meaning, hidden in the strangeness, was the unconscious trying to tell you something you needed to hear. You do not need to interpret any dream tonight. Let the symbols come, dressed in their costumes, and know that the dreams arriving tonight are not random but composed, each one a message from a mind that has spent all day waiting for the opportunity to speak. The night is when it does its work. The night is when the unconscious does its deepest, most concentrated, most essential work. The processing that keeps the psyche functioning. The integration that keeps the personality coherent, the compensation that keeps the conscious life balanced, and the dreaming that delivers the messages the day was too loud to hear. The night is not a gap in your life. It is one of the most important parts of it. The hours during which the unconscious, working without interference, performs the psychological maintenance that the waking hours, with their noise and their defenses and their constant managing, do not allow. The night heals what the day damaged. The night processes what the day accumulated. The night integrates what the day fragmented. And the night dreams what the day suppressed, bringing to the surface, in the safe container of the sleeping state, the emotions, the insights, and the recognitions that the waking state could not afford. Think of the night not as an absence, but as a presence. The presence of the unconscious at its most active, its most creative, it's most directly in contact with the parts of you that the day keeps at arm's length. You do not need to do any work tonight. Let the night work for you, as it always has, and know that the hours you are about to spend in sleep are not empty but full, the unconscious using every one of them to tend, to process, to integrate, and to dream. The unconscious prepares tomorrow. The unconscious prepares tomorrow while you sleep. And this is one of the most practically important secrets about the sleeping mind, that the unconscious is not merely processing today, but actively preparing for tomorrow. Arranging the psychological resources you will need. Processing the emotions that would have interfered. Integrating the experiences that will inform your responses. And producing, through the night's dreaming, a person who wakes slightly different from the person who fell asleep. Adjusted, updated, prepared by a mind that works through the night on problems the day could not solve. The preparation is invisible. You wake and feel rested, or you wake and feel that something has shifted, or you wake with a clarity you did not have the night before. And the clarity, the shifting, the resting, is the unconscious's overnight work, completed while you were not watching. The preparation does not require your direction. It requires only your sleep, the surrender of the conscious mind's control, and the trusting, which you perform every night without thinking about it, that the mind you are handing your psyche to is competent, purposeful, and working in your interest. Think of the mornings when something was different, when a problem seemed smaller, when a decision seemed clearer, when the world looked slightly different from how it looked the night before, and know that the different was the unconscious's overnight preparation, the mind that never sleeps, doing its most important work while you did yours, which was simply, restfully, to let it. Sleep is not the absence of mind. Sleep is not the absence of mind, but the presence of a different kind of mind, the unconscious mind, fully active, fully operational, fully engaged in the work the waking mind cannot do, working not with the tools of reason and analysis, but with the tools of image and feeling and symbol, producing not thoughts but dreams, not plans but visions, not conclusions but compensations, each one a specific, purposeful product of an intelligence that does its best work in the dark. The sleeping mind is not the waking mind turned off. It is the waking mind turned inside out, the unconscious, which spent all day beneath the surface, now fully emerged, fully in charge, processing with a freedom and a depth the waking state never allows. The sleeping mind sees differently, thinks differently, processes differently, and the differently is not a deficit, but a complement. The unconscious's mode of processing being the exact complement of the conscious mind's, the two together, waking and sleeping, producing a comprehensiveness that neither alone can achieve. Think of sleep not as a shutdown, but as a shift, the conscious mind stepping aside and the unconscious stepping forward, and how the stepping forward, which happens every night, is the unconscious's moment. the hours during which it has full access to everything the day kept it from reaching. You do not need to think tonight. Let the thinking rest, and let the other mind, the deeper mind, the dreaming mind, take its turn. The depth that holds you every night. The depth that holds you every night is the unconscious mind receiving you as you fall asleep. The vast, dark, intelligent interior that has been waiting for you all day, and that now, as the conscious mind loosens its grip, opens to receive you the way the ocean receives a river, absorbing you into something so much larger than yourself that the individual self, for a few hours, dissolves into the collective, into the archetypal, into the depth that is both yours and not yours, personal and universal at the same time. The holding is not passive, it is active, the unconscious catching the falling consciousness the way arms catch a falling body, receiving the weight of the day, the burden of the defenses, the fatigue of the persona, and holding all of it, gently, in a darkness that does not judge, does not evaluate, and does not require anything from you except the willingness to let go. Think of the moment of falling asleep as a falling into, a descent into a holding that has been there every night of your life, the unconscious waiting, the depth opening, and you, the conscious self, releasing into the arms of the mind that is, and has always been, the largest part of who you are. You do not need to hold yourself tonight. Let yourself be held by the depth, by the dark, by the unconscious that has been carrying you every night since the first night, and that will carry you again tonight, faithfully, gently, into whatever the dreaming brings. The healing that happens in the dark. The healing that happens in the dark is the unconscious mind's most essential nocturnal function, the psychological repair that occurs when the defenses are down and the wounds, which have been sealed all day by the ego's management, are finally accessible to the psyche's self-healing mechanisms. The healing does not require your participation. It requires only your absence, the stepping aside of the conscious mind that has been managing the wounds rather than healing them. And the stepping aside, which happens naturally in sleep, gives the unconscious access to the injuries the waking mind has been keeping sealed. The healing is not dramatic. It is incremental, a tiny repair each night, a small processing, a slight integration. And the increments, accumulated over time, produce a gradual, barely perceptible improvement that the person experiences not as a breakthrough, but as a slow settling, a quiet reduction in the urgency of the pain. Think of how the wounds you carry feel slightly different in the morning, slightly less sharp, slightly more manageable, and how the difference is the unconscious's overnight repair. A small healing performed in the dark by a mind that knows where the wounds are and how to reach them. You do not need to heal anything tonight. Let the healing happen on its own, in the dark, and know that the mind that carries you into sleep is also the mind that tends to your wounds while you rest, and the tending, done every night, is the gentlest form of healing available to a human being. The mind you can trust in sleep. The mind you can trust in sleep is the unconscious, the same mind this entire video has been revealing. The mind that holds everything, speaks in symbols, runs the patterns, guides toward wholeness, and works every night in the dark on your behalf. The trusting is what you do every night without thinking about it. The handing of your consciousness to a mind you cannot see, the releasing of control into a darkness you cannot monitor. And the releasing, which is the most natural thing you do, is also the most trusting. The nightly act of faith in which you place your entire psyche into the hands of the unconscious and trust it to return you, in the morning, intact, rested, and slightly more whole than when you gave yourself over. The trust is earned. The unconscious has returned you every morning. It has processed your days, dreamed your dreams, healed your wounds, and prepared your tomorrows for your entire life without a single failure, without a single morning when the mind was not returned. Think of the trust you place in the unconscious every night, and how the trust, unthinking and absolute, is the most reliable trust you have ever given, placed in a mind you have never met, honored every morning by a return you have never questioned. You do not need to generate any trust tonight. Let the trusting happen as it always does, naturally. And know that the mind you are about to hand yourself to is the mind that has never let you down. Tonight, the unconscious is working. Tonight, the unconscious is working, right now, in this moment. As the drowsiness deepens and the thoughts slow and the words you are hearing begin to dissolve into the feeling they are carrying rather than the meaning they are conveying, the unconscious is receiving you. It is opening. It is preparing the space you are about to enter, the dreaming space, the processing space, the dark, creative healing space that has been waiting for you since you woke this morning. Everything you heard tonight, every secret about the mind beneath your mind, is settling now, not as information but as recognition. The quiet acknowledgement that you are more than you thought, that you carry more than you knew, and that the carrying, which is done by a mind you have only begun to meet, will continue through the night, faithfully, as it always has. You do not need to work at anything tonight. Let the unconscious work. Let it do what it has always done, in the dark, in the quiet, in the depth where the conscious mind cannot follow. The working has already begun. The secrets that rest beside you now. The secrets that rest beside you now are the 100 truths you heard tonight. Each one a window into the mind you have never met. The mind that lives beneath your awareness, holds your shadow, speaks in symbols, runs your patterns, guides your growth, and works every night in the dark on the project of your wholeness. The secrets are resting now, settling into you the way the night settles into the world, not with effort, but with gravity. Each one finding its place, each one becoming part of the quiet, growing understanding that you are larger, deeper, and more mysterious than you ever knew. Let the secrets rest. Let them settle. Let them become part of the knowing that will still be there in the morning, quieter than tonight, but present. The first seeds of a relationship with the mind, beneath your mind, that has been waiting all your life to begin. The mind that carries you to sleep. The mind that carries you to sleep is the same mind that has been carrying you through every dream, every night, for your entire life. The vast, dark, patient, intelligent unconscious that receives you when the waking ends and holds you through the hours of the night, tending, healing, dreaming, preparing, and carrying you gently through the dark toward the morning you cannot yet see. Let it carry you now. Let the conscious mind release its hold. Let the thoughts dissolve into feelings, and the feelings dissolve into images, and the images dissolve into the quiet, ancient dark, where the unconscious lives and works and waits. The carrying has begun. You are being held by the mind you met tonight, the mind beneath your mind, the ally, the guide, the depth that has never left you and never will. Let it hold you. Let it carry you. Let the carrying be the last thing you feel. The sleep that holds your whole self. The sleep that holds your whole self is here now. The conscious mind is releasing. The unconscious is receiving. The ego and the depth are meeting in the way they meet every night. The surface dissolving into the ocean, the island returning to the water. And the water, dark and vast and ancient, holding everything. The shadow and the gold, the wounds and the wisdom. The person you have been and the person you are becoming. All of it held in the same dark, in the same quiet, in the same sleep that has held you every night and that holds you now, gently, completely, asking nothing, giving everything. Sleep now. The unconscious has you. You are safe in the depth. You are held by the mind that has always held you. And the holding, tonight, is the most complete it has ever been. Because tonight, for the first time, you know what is holding you. Sleep.